Yeah, the format. Yeah, Central will go over it. No problem. Let's see. All right, can you guys hear me on YouTube? Yeah, praise God.
Them boys looking over their last notes. Is it Christian versus Muslim? Yes. Is there a reason you turned off the gifts? They're not off. The gifts are on. You guys can feel free to gift if you guys are Muslim. Feel free to gift your Muslim brother. If you guys are Christian, feel free to gift your Christian brother. But if you guys are gifting, I'd probably ask wait till the middle. If you're gonna gift any like gifts that have sounds, like wait till the middle so it doesn't interrupt them. Okay, Central said he's on his way. Gift the host for moderating. Hey man, I don't say too much, but nah. Let's see. Here's Central.
Hey, yo, what's good?
What's up?
What's up, Central?
What's up, Alby? What's good, man?
What format should I do for this? I don't like. I'll make y'all big screen when you're talking, but I don't know which format to do. How the heck do I change it? This man Central already getting the most gifts. This is absurd.
Why am I getting guys? I'm not the one debating.
Yo, that's absurd. All right, I think this is Eminem. Is that Eminem actually, or is that?
Yeah, that's him.
Okay, he had like 0 followers. I didn't know. I want to make sure.
No, it's me.
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure. All right,
guys, it's not me debating. It's Eminem debating. It's the brother above me that's debating.
Okay, let's see how I'm going to do this. Yo, how the heck you change the layout, bro?
Click the guest thing.
Okay.
And click
settings. Okay.
Yep.
We'll do like maybe this, and then we can have whoever's on the big screen there, and then Central, you can have your time on the side.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm gonna. Oh yeah, look, guys, we can like share the live, get some people in here.
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm in no rush, but although I know Eminem, he has schooling and all that kind of stuff, so whatever he wants to do, but I'm good with it.
Yeah, we got like a few minutes, but guys, let's get 1,000 people in here. What are we doing? This is about to, bro. This is the debate everyone's been waiting for.
Is my incense still burning? I don't even think it is.
Guys, any Muslims in the comments, can you go to any Muslim live Tell them to pull up. Guys, stop gifting me. I am not debating. The brother Eminem is debating.
That's funny. Ain't that like freaking $50 you just got or something? That's
Nah.
10,000 coins? What is 10,000 coins?
Like $25, something like that.
I thought for every 1,000 coins is like $5.
Nah. Make sure you guys gift the brother below me. I'm not debating.
Yeah, if you're Muslim, gift Eminem. If you're Christian, gift Alby. If you just like me, gift me.
Nah, don't gift him. Don't gift the host. He ain't doing that.
Hosting, I'm taking 3 hours out of my night.
Hey.
Transfer all them gifts to me, baby.
It's well worth it, boy.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't care. No, I don't care to do this, man. It's a good debate.
Yalla, guys, let's go. Share the live, like the live.
3 hours? No, I'm not literally 3 hours. Not literally 3 hours, man.
Central, you want to go over to the format?
Yeah, let me go through our messages and I'll find it right now.
Okay.
These folks don't understand hyperbole.
Alby, we messaged on the account you're live on right now, right?
I believe so, because I'm rarely on the other account.
I got you. Let me pull it up. I'm actually going to write it down. Give me 1 second. All right, let me go to our messages. Guys, make sure you get the brother Eminem to 100K gifts.
$250. That's lit.
100K gifts? Nah, that's like more than that.
If that's more than that, then 10K gotta be more than $25. Yo,
Nah,
math ain't mathing, bro.
No, I got 10K yesterday on my live. It was only like 30 something dollars, 32 something. Okay.
They're hoeing you.
15. Okay, let me write this down. And then I'll go over it with you guys. Alby, we agreed on 7-minute rebuttals or 10? 7, right?
Yeah, I think everything we agreed on except for the cross examination.
Or I'm sorry, not the rebuttal. The rebuttal. It was 7 minutes.
I think there was 2 rebuttals.
2 rebuttals. Yep.
Yeah.
7 minutes each.
Are they?
7. Yeah. Do you want to do more? I mean.
No. I mean, let me see. 15-minute openings, 10-minute rebuttal for the first rebuttal. Okay, that's good. 7-minute rebuttal for the second rebuttal. And then we'll do a 10-minute cross exams for both and 8-minute conclusion and 3 questions and answers at the end.
Yep. Okay, I'm writing this down. The second rebuttal, how long was that one?
Second rebuttal, 7 minutes.
Okay. And then 10-minute cross. And then 8-minute conclusion. And then 3 questions each. All right, I'm going to run this by you, Alby. Let me know if it sounds good. Eminem as well. So you guys got 15-minute opening intros each. You each have a 10-minute rebuttal. Then you each have a 7-minute rebuttal. And then you each have 10-minute cross exams. And then you each have a 8-minute conclusion. And then you each have 3 questions that you'll answer from the guest.
Perfect.
Good. No problem.
And then for cross exams, y'all just gotta be mature, man. Just And Central, are we doing the 15 seconds for
I told M about the idea. If you want to run it by Alby, see what he says. I mean, if they both agree, you know what I'm saying, then it's up to them.
Yeah, do you guys want to do like 15 seconds to answer a question so we don't like waste time, or what do you guys want to do for that?
15 seconds, bro.
That's what I said.
Yeah, I think.
How much time do you want, or do you just want as much time as possible? It's whatever you guys want to do, so it don't matter to us.
Is it alright if we go 30-second responses, like uninterrupted?
Yeah, what do you think, Abby?
I mean, yeah, that's fine, I guess. I mean, for me, I would just say to get your response. I mean, to get your response out without, filibustering or anything like that. But however you're comfortable.
Is 30 seconds enough?
I highly doubt it, but we'll find out. I mean,
okay, want to push it to 45?
Yeah, that's fine. 45 seconds.
Okay, let's do 45.
All right, Central, you're muted, Central.
45-second responses?
Okay.
If needed.
Yikes.
Central will be the one timing that, so he'll have the timer on the screen, I assume. But
Wait, yeah, of course. Do you guys want, when you're asked the question, the person asking the question, do you want the time paused and then 30 seconds to start, or 45 seconds to start, or do you want the time to just keep rolling?
No, roll the time.
it might take too long if you depending on 45 seconds. I don't know.
Okay, push it back to 30 and go with the first option.
Okay, 30 seconds and then pause the time?
Yeah.
Okay, let me pull up my clock. I'm going to have to pull up 2 clocks.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll do this. Okay, I'll figure this out real quick. I'm sure Google has a stopwatch, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll do that. Yeah, let me make this shorter. Guys, like the live and share the live. What are you guys doing, bro? Let's get to 1K people in here, bro. Let's get 1K in here. Let's go. Mr. Nick, how was your day?
It's pretty good. Can't complain. How about yourself?
I talked to you earlier. Stop acting like we didn't talk. I already asked you.
So then why'd you ask me what day was, bro? We're just creating a fake conversation.
Yeah. Somebody might need to help me with this. Oh, no, I got it. Okay. Save. So 15-minute. Let me make a 10-minute one. Guys, like the live, share the live. Well, I swear to God, Muslims, this is the debate we've all been waiting for as Muslims.
This is about every debate.
Stop gifting me. I'm not debating. $15, 10, 7, 10, 8. Okay, then you go here. Okay, so again, just to clarify, so when the question is being asked, as soon as the question is done, I pause the time, allow the 30 seconds to answer, or?
That's what it sounded like.
I don't think you're going to pause the time period, brother. Just let the time roll. But you're going to have to, I mean, you almost don't even, to be honest with you, bro, you don't have to count 30 seconds. It's kind of, it's there. You know what I mean? And if I'm taking too long, I think M can discern that, not a problem, or vice versa.
Okay.
And then, do you mind giving us, let's see, do you want 2 warnings for halfway and then at the end for the opening, or just to me, I'm keeping my own time anyways, so I'm not sure if M's keeping his own time, but I don't know what it would be. So whatever's easier for M. If he's keeping his own time, that's a different story.
Well, I'm gonna have it like this, Alby.
You're gonna play the time.
Yeah. It'll be like literally. So what I'm gonna do is, for example, your intros, I'm gonna do this, right? So you'll literally see it.
Oh, I see. That's good. That's really good.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do.
Okay,
I'm just showing my pretty face right now because I'm feeling myself, bro. Sorry. Got my beard done up, you know. Hey, I'm gonna do what I can to promote my Muslim brother, Nick. If you wanna, do the same with Alby. But
I'm just curious. You guys mind if I ask one question to the audience?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
A 1 for Nick's beard or 2 for Central's beard? Which one is it?
Bro.
It's obviously me, bro. Locking.
1 for Nick, 1 for Nick, 2 for Central.
Get down, bruh. No comparison.
I ain't got no lineup either. That's crazy.
Nick smiling, knowing damn well he can't compare, bro.
Bro, I already know mine is way better. Get real. Boy got that glue on beard.
Nah, bro. I got new beard oil. It's actually really good, bro.
What scent?
Mint.
Mint?
Yeah, mint. But it is like it's almost like hairspray. I don't know. It's weird. It makes your beard rough, but it's like for the purpose of puffing it out more. That's what you need, bro.
Nah. I like mine just be straight symmetrical. Good. What the heck, bro? Wish I could see the comments, but I got free.
Hey guys, look, I'm gonna hype the Muslim brother up, guys. I said it before. I'm gonna say it again. Whatever Alby gets, if they send him a lion, Muslims you send 2. If he gets a galaxy, Muslims you send 2. Whatever they're doing, double it. Show the Christians we can go toe to toe with them, guys. Let's go.
Christians show them that Vatican money.
Christians, every time Eminem gets any kind of gift, remember him also in your prayers and pray for his salvation as well, along with every Muslim here.
I'm not gonna lie, that Vatican money is crazy, bro.
Hey, bro.
That Mormon money,
there's
bro.
There's a reason the Muslims wanted Haggai Sophia so bad. Hey, they put some money into that.
Hey, look, man. There's a reason Dubai is the way it is, bro. That's all I'm saying. Yalla, guys, come on. Tap the likes, share the live. I think once we get like 800 viewers, we want to start it.
All right, so I assume M's starting, right? Since he's supposed to be taking the affirmative, and plus he challenged.
Yeah,
That's correct.
Just let me know when you're ready.
I want as many people in here as possible because a lot of times when we debate, what happens is people join late and they have like no idea as to what's going on. So that's what I want. Just as many people in here as possible. Share the live, guys. Like the live. I'm going to share it again. This is the debate everyone's been asking me to set up. Everyone's been asking Alby. Like, y'all got what you asked for. I got the brother Eminem here. By the way, he's the real Slim Shady. So just want to clear that up. I think the rules are like giving Nick like any blasphemy, any interruption during the openings or rebuttals concedes the debate. Like that's a given.
Yeah, that would just be dumb. Yeah.
Whenever you guys want to start, man, It's up to you. I'm good to go on my end. Let me clean my camera so it's a little bit clearer. Let me make this big screen. I'm gonna flip my camera.
Whenever Ham's ready.
Okay, is the time good for you guys? You guys can both see it?
Yep.
Okay, beautiful.
A little small. Is there a way to zoom in?
Zoom in. Guys, I am not debating. Stop gifting me. I can't zoom in. It's not letting me. Or wait, let me try this. Nah, yeah, it's not letting me, Wola.
Just give me a second. I'll be right back. I need 30 seconds.
No worries, man. Zayed, stop gifting me, bro. What's good with this kid? We're at 700 views. 800. We did it. All right, I'm gonna go on mute. Nick, you go.
No, you go ahead, Ham.
All right, so you start as soon as I talk, right? I'm guessing that's a yes. All right, no problem. All right, 3. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. والحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على عبده ورسوله وأمينه على وحيه وخليله وصفوته من عباده نبينا وإمامنا وسيدنا محمد بن عبد الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سلك سبيله واهتدى بهداها إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. In the name of Allah, all thanks be unto Him, and blessings and peace be upon the Messenger of Allah, his family and followers, and what has come after. In the Holy Scripture sent down by Allah, Jalla Jalaluhu, He tells us in the Quran, Surah An-Nisa, Ayah 157, وَقَوْلُهُمْ إِنَّا قَتَلْنَا الْمَسِيحَ عِيسَى بْنُ مَرْيَمَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبِّهَ لَهُمْ وَإِنَّ الَّذِينَ اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ لَفِي شَكٍّ مِّنْهُ ما لهم به من علم إلا اتباع الظن وما قتلوه يقينا. The Jews said, we have unalived the Messiah, Jesus, the son of Mary, the messenger of God. They did not unalive him, nor did they crucify him, though it was made to appear like that to them. Those that disagreed about him are full of doubt, with no knowledge to follow, only supposition. They certainly did not unalive him. Before beginning, it is important to highlight to both Christians and Muslims alike the theological significance in Islam of the alleged crucifixion. What are the implications of such a thing? What does it mean to us? In the 11th century CE, the famous Spanish Muslim polymath Imam Ibn Hazm issues a legal decree on the one who claims Isa alayhi salam was unalived or crucified. And I quote, Fatwa number 41, question on Jesus alayhi salam being neither unalived nor crucified, but rather Allah the Almighty grabbed him and lifted him up to himself. And I quote, whoever says that Isa alayhi salam was unalived or crucified, he is a kafir, apostate, whose blood and money are lawful for lying upon the Quran and going against the consensus. Based on what's been mentioned, everybody can hopefully see the severity, both theologically and legally, of the crucifixion under the Islamic paradigm. Likewise, the Christians share a similar view, holding dearly on to the death of Christ as the center foundation to what constitutes all Christian belief. For Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 14, and if Christ has not been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. My goals for today are one of two things. A, to cast doubt on the historicity of Christ's crucifixion, or B, to demonstrate and prove a higher likelihood of Jesus alayhi salam not being crucified. In either scenario, this is a victory for the Muslim. If one strikes a thorn into the traditional narrative of Christ dying as crucified, this places the Christian in a position of uncertainty and worry as their most fundamental belief becomes questioned. If we manage to prove a higher probability of Jesus not being crucified, that completely shatters all of Christianity. And the opponent is forced to submit to the truth, even if he might not confess it. Therefore, this debate will strictly circle around the subject of the historicity of the crucifixion. I will not be dealing with theological arguments or scriptural references used in religious manners, as they have no effect upon the likelihood of the proposition being true or false. Quoting the Quran against me at any point will not increase nor decrease the historical probability of the crucifixion being true. I'm well aware that Alby probably might do such a thing, so I'm mentioning that ahead to save all of us in here from what we call red herrings and logical fallacies. Okay? So we're going to stay within the confines of historicity and naturalistic paradigms. Secondly, quoting the Old Testament prophecies will also not increase the likelihood of the crucifixion, as these are theological points, not historical arguments. They also assume the stability of the text being quoted, its authenticity, authorship, and dating, which are a whole can of worms worth unpacking, and I'm not obliged by any means to take a single reference until all these criteria are substantiated. In honors history, you do what's called methodical neutrality, not methodical credulity, where you assume all your sources to begin with and simply shove it down somebody's throat. So, hopefully, moving forward, I expect to hear something along the line. I expect to hear something along the lines of historical documents and archaeological findings, not rants on Isaiah 53, Psalms 22, ayats about the Quran, quote unquote, confirming the Bible, or what does the Quran mean by the word mutawaffika? These are all simply irrelevant, and no academic work, be it from Oxford, Cambridge, Yale, or Harvard, mention these theological sidelines as some points worth making in their historical studies. So that's beyond clear. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's begin with an attack on the opponent's position and completely dismantle what he'll bring, then make our own case for the defense. The first line of defense will, as usual, be the four Gospels, typically named as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The general claim is that they are reliable eyewitness testimony from the mid-late first century, consisting of 2 disciples and 2 apostles as authors of the narrative. All these evangelical assertions are nothing but the wishful dream the Christian wishes he had as a way to make sense out of this religion. So first, dealing with the question of authorship. From an internal evidence standpoint, the authors never identified themselves explicitly, from the beginning of the gospel all the way to the end. So we can immediately skip that part. Secondly, based on the external evidence, the first explicit attestation we have of all the 4 gospels is in Irenaeus of Lyon's book called Against Heresies, which is in the year 185 CE. 185 CE. That means around 140 years after Christ. So a century and a half, if not 2 centuries, depending on how you date the work. If he's going to quote me Papias, I'm going to go ahead and refute that in the rebuttal. Because that main quote, not only because of its text alone is problematic, but because it mentions only 2 gospels, and the earliest quote we have of that is from who? A random person 200 years after Papias, Eusebius of Caesarea. So your earliest quote of Papias, right, is about 300 years after Christ, because Eusebius said that in his book called Ecclesiastical History, okay, written in 325. And there is no dispute over this as a scholarly consensus regarding the anonymity of the Gospels. So this completely dismantles them being first-hand accounts. All the scholars agree on this. Raymond Brown, who's a Catholic, they agree on it. Dale B. Martin, who's a Catholic, they agree on it. J.K. Elliott, who's a Protestant, they agree on it. Then you have Philip Wesley Comfort, who's a Protestant, hardcore evangelical, might I mention, also who agrees on it. You can keep going on with the names. Hans von Kampenhausen, Wolfgang Speyer. The list goes on and it never ends. Now, regarding the dating, I hope he did not think I'm going to grant him the fact that these Gospels are from the 1st century, because I don't. And if you go look at the scholarship in Europe, you would find out that a lot of the scholars post-date it up until the 2nd century. And if you're already aware, we have no external attestation of these gospels ever being quoted or mentioned. And I know he's going to mention the quotes. And all the scholars agree that the quotes are ambiguous. And they're nothing more than 2 to 3 paraphrases that are based on oral tradition, which is why Papias says he preferred oral tradition over the written book called Kerygma. And this is why Justin Martyr also said that he believed in the logia of the Lord, the sayings of the Lord, not the scripture of the Lord. He doesn't say it is written. He doesn't specify the gospels, none of that. So we have people like Marcus Vincent, who's still alive till this day, who dates it as far as 138 to 144 CE. Then you have Jason B. Bidun. He's a biblical scholar and a historian of religion who mentions it in his book called The First New Testament. Then also you have Paul Louis Cochet, who as far as 1936, he mentioned this in his essay called Is Marcion's Gospel One of the Synoptics, in page 256. Then you have William R. Farmer, who dates it to 125. Edward Evanson, who dates it to 100. John V. M. Sturdy and Mary Ann Tolbert, who dates it to 80 to 90 CE. So this is a plethora of scholars ranging from the European hemisphere all the way to the Western Anglo-American hemisphere. So on both sides, you have these scholars also mentioning them. And I quoted about 6, and I can name about 25 more. So that's easy. So that's dating and authorship out of the way. So don't bring the Gospels until you refute all these points. Then, regarding reliability, there is many historical contradictions and problems that weaken the reliability of these Gospels. Most scholars are aware, like Raymond Brown, C.K. Barrett, Woodruff Bultmann, regarding the redaction criticism, which I can elaborate on later. So I'll just ask a few questions so he can rebut and hopefully show how reliable these Gospels are. First question, there is a census regarding a world taxation that happened in the Roman Empire that Luke records. And he says the whole world. And I'll say that's an exaggeration. Fine, we'll grant it's the Byzantine Empire or the Roman Empire only. And he says that the people who had to pay that tax had to go to their ancestors' land from 10 generations back and put their taxes in there. Question, who in the world records this in the entire face of the earth besides Luke? First question, regarding reliability. Second, regarding the Johannine statements of I am the way and the truth of the life, no one can come to the Father before me, I and the Father are one, before Abraham was I am, all these I am statements. Second question, besides John, who records these Johannine divine sayings? Not Mark, not Luke, not Matthew. So if you want something to be historically reliable, you best believe it better have attestation, better have corroboration, and better be an independent source, and it better be early. Guess what? We don't have any of those four. Then another one. We have a figure by the name of Nicodemus, who's also mentioned in the Gospel of John. Nowhere to be found except for chapter 2 and chapter 19 and chapter 7. Not in any other gospel, not in Paul's writings, not in James, Peter, Titus, or anybody else. So now we can move on from the Gospels all the way to Paul. Regarding Paul now, he is not a first-hand witness. He is a second-hand witness, if you even want to call it that, who some scholars date from 50 up as late as 80 CE, which is going to substantiate the dating of them. Again, I'm not going to grant it. Methodical neutrality, not methodical credulity. Remember what I said at the beginning. So regarding Paul, I'm just going to go with the scholarship. If he wants me to elaborate, no problem. 7 letters of him are deemed authentic, and all the rest of them are typically seen as forged. And there is a nice book that summarizes all the scholarly sayings by the name of Wolfgang Speyer, and the book is called, in 1971, Geschichte der Christlichen Geschichte der Forschung. Okay? So the history of Christian forgery in English, 1971. The entire book is just on that. Now, regarding the reliability of Paul himself, if you look at early Jewish Christianity from the writings like the Pseudo-Clementine homilies, which are from the 4th century, that are attributed to Clement of Rome, and you look at the Epistula Petrae, which is attributed to Peter, in there he calls Paul an enemy of God and my enemy, not me, meaning Peter's enemy. And he says that letter to James. And if you also look at the early Christian Jewish community like the Ebionites and the Nazarenes, who also claim succession from both Peter and James, they also despise Paul, and they say he's an apostate, and he left the religion, and he is accursed, and God forsook him. And when you look at the beliefs of these people, they didn't affirm a crucifixion. Okay, so now we can go on to the non-biblical sources, which he's probably going to bring. Number one, Josephus. There is lots of scholarship that says it's a forgery. That's number one. Number two, I'm not going to quote scholarship as much as I'd like to. I'm going to go to the primary arguments. The first attestation we have of this quote ever being made in the entire world is a random person from 200 years later by the name of Eusebius of Caesarea. And the earliest manuscripts that you have of Josephus is in the 10th century. 10th century, 300 years to 400 years after the Quran, was emerged. 2 manuscripts only, not abundant. Same thing happens with Tacitus. Same thing happens with Pliny the Younger. And everybody else from there is late. And these are people who are not even testifying from independent sources, but rather they're coming in with sources that are dependent on Christians. Sometimes you'll find them mocking Christians. Sometimes you'll find them quoting Christians. So if he's going to quote Suetonius, reminder, he's from 150 onwards. Reminder, if you're going to quote Malabar Serapion, he's the same scenario. If you're going to quote Thales, he's the same scenario. Lucian, same scenario. Celsus, same scenario. If you're going to quote the Talmud or the Mishnah, you're going to have to show that the manuscripts do not post-date the 3rd century. Okay? So for the attack, this is what I have to say. And hopefully now, he talks about the dating. He talks about the reliability, both for Paul and the Gospels. He establishes the authorship for them. He mentions the consensus. And then he also deals with the stability of the text of the New Testament. Then he goes ahead and establishes to be a reliable source and solves the 3 historical errors that I brought up. On the second turn, I'll be mentioning in defense. So hopefully no Quran, no New Testament, stay naturalistic, don't shove in presuppositions. I rest my time.
All right, when I begin speaking, you're going to start the time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I praise the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all things visible and invisible. I believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God, born of the Father before all ages, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, consubstantial with the Father. Through him all things were made. For us men and for our salvation he came down from heaven, and by the Holy Spirit was incarnate of the Virgin Mary and became man. For our sake he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. He suffered death and was buried and rose again on the 3rd day in accordance with the scriptures. He ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of the Father. He will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, who proceeds from the Father and the Son, who with the Father and the Son is adored and glorified, who has spoken through the prophets. I believe in one holy, Catholic, and apostolic church. I confess one baptism for the forgiveness of sins, and I look forward to the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. Amen. My prayer is simply this. Love is so far from the heart that due to being dead in sin, the thought of the cross from a loving God is foolishness to those who are perishing. I do not pray not to be like the Jews and Muslims who are astray, but I pray for the Jew and Muslim that the eyes of their hearts be open to see your true beauty and majesty, O Lord. I also pray for the peace in Palestine, that the oppression from both tyrannical governments ceases, and that they may also come to know you, O Lord, as do your people, the church. Now, with that being said, here's the case I'm going to be making. I'm going to be going over, as a Muslim, if I wasn't dealing with the Muslim, I wouldn't be dealing with, I'll be going about it in a different way. But since he's a Muslim, and if he's a good Muslim, then he's going to obey his Quran. And if his Quran commands me to judge by the gospel, then don't yap your lips. I'm going to judge by the gospel, and I'm going to do what Allah's telling me to do, not have you tell me what not to do. You understand? So with that being said, first of all, scholars almost universally accept Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Philippians, 1 Thessalonians, Philemon as Paul's letters, right? On top of that, Paul Meir, who's a retired distinguished professor of ancient history, Western Michigan University, says this: many facts in the ancient world are established on one source. 2 or 3 sources often make an event impregnable. You understand what that means? 2 or 3 sources. Well, let's do this. Let me take Bart Ehrman's list that he has of people that he goes to in order to check out historicity. Josephus, 1. Tacitus, 2. Marbar Serpian, who was a Stoic philosopher from the Roman province of Syria, who wrote sometime between 73 CE and 3rd century. Mara wrote a letter to his son, also called Sarpion, which may contain an early non-Christian reference to the crucifixion. Suetonius, 4. The Talmud, 5. Pliny II, 6. Lucinian, 7. Thales, 8. Celsus, 9. The Dead Sea Scrolls, 10. James Ushery, 11. And Pauline epistles. That's 12. What else can I ask for? Moreover, scholars that are not Christian, like John Dominic Crossan, and he says that he was crucified, Jesus was crucified, is as sure as anything historical can ever be. Another non-Christian scholar, Marcus Borg, said some judgments are so probable as to certain. For example, Jesus really existed and he really was crucified. But the Bible, it's written by man. How can we trust it? Well, for the same reason we trust most of recorded history, which was written by man. The only difference in our case is the historical records of the Bible were penned by men, inspired by the creator of man. If biblical evidence was needed to qualify unbelievers into believing, the whole world would believe. Truth of the matter is, we are the only religion that bases our faith on the power of God rather than man. And if belief was left up to us, we'd all fall into condemnation, since salvation is impossible with man, only possible with God. Yet even an ignoramus would know that Islam claims to be a byproduct of the Abrahamic faiths. Therefore, concluding if any of the 3 contradict one or both, it would be proven to be a false witness. Well, I can easily demonstrate how that's the case, but I'm going to go on the positive notions in which the Quran puts forward. Now, the Bible, right, over the Quran. Why? The answer is simple: because we have 1,500 years, over 40 biblical authors, all bearing witness to Christ and the manuscript evidence, who were preserved by those who were entrusted with the oracles, namely the Jews. We have archaeological evidence proving historic accuracy. We have eyewitness accounts, corroborating accounts, literary consistency, prophetic consistency, expert scrutiny, leader acceptance, and global influence, and not to mention change lives. What else can I ask for once again? But let me do this. Let me go to Prophet Bart Ehrman's quote. Bart Ehrman says this to a Muslim in his blog: I'm completely happy for my work to be used by Muslims or by Mormons or by Jews or by Buddhists or by Methodists or by Episcopalians, Baptists, Lutherans, Roman Catholics, Russian Orthodox, or anyone else. But I have to say that I do not see my scholarship as advancing the agenda of any of these groups. I'm simply engaged in historical scholarship. I do not think the Quran has any particular insights about the historical Jesus that are to be taken as independent reports by historical scholars. Neither does any other historical scholar that seriously on the historical Jesus. And I doubt very much that my views coincide with 99% of Islamic belief about Jesus. For one thing, I am convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that Jesus was physically crucified and died on the cross. That is rock bottom certain in my books, and it stands completely at odds with standard Islamic beliefs. Now, that's true, Bart. It does stand at odds with standard Islamic beliefs, but that's only because the normal Muslim seeks to oppose what his Quran teaches. But we're here to correct that today with the time remaining. With that being said, I would encourage you guys to check out this website called Muslim Writers Guild of America. in this website, right, where Muslims are writing articles, here's an article by Sohib Awan. And the article is titled, "The Quran is Clear, Jesus Has Passed Away." And he makes a beautiful case as to why that's the case. So let's go over some of his points here. In response, the majority of Muslims object to translating tawafitina as caused me to die, instead translating the word as raised me. Secondly, it's claimed that because this is a conversation, it is to be held on the day of judgment and Jesus will eventually return to earth. One cannot conclude that Jesus is already dead, but that he will die after his return. To determine the meaning of the word in the Quran, one must first assess the usage of the word in other verses of the Quran. Secondly, assess the Prophet Muhammad's usage of the word and his commentary on that verse. And lastly, assess the companions of the Prophet Muhammad's understanding of it as far as the Quran is concerned. In every instance, a word from the same three-letter root and verb form as tawafatina is used is invariably indicates death or sleep. The Quran defines this usage when it states Allah takes the souls at the time of death, and of those not dead, he takes at the time of sleep. Now, we're going to come back to this article in just a little bit as we continue to make our case for the crucifixion. With that being said, one must understand that Arabic lexicons confirm when Allah is the subject of the verb. Let me repeat that. When Allah is the subject of the verb, Allah is the cause of the death. So in chapter 3, verse 55, when it says, "I will cause you to die and raise you to myself," that would be the correct rendering. Now, notice how my friend Eminem here quoted chapter 4, verse 157 and 158 of the Quran. Chapter 4, verse 157 and 158. Poor guy couldn't exegete it correctly. Therefore, let me help him. I don't mind. That's what Christians are here for, to help the Muslim and put him in place by the grace of the living God. Now, the Jews here are mocking Muhammad over the virgin birth and over them supposedly crucifying the Messiah because they don't believe that the Messiah can be dead or killed. Therefore, they're mocking Muhammad. So, in other words, it appeared to the Jews as though he was crucified. Though you killed him because you thought he was a false Messiah, but no, Allah raised him to himself. Now, the context speaks of the Jews mocking Muhammad, just like I said, insulting Mary by saying she's birthed him illegitimately. And Muhammad was saying Jesus was born of a virgin and that he's the Messiah. The Jews mocked him by saying that, how can he be the Messiah when we killed him? If he's the Messiah, how can we kill him, in other words? Right? Well, that's the point. It's interesting because Allah uses similar language in regards to the Muslims fighting pagans. Where? In chapter 8, verse 17 of the Quran. There were about 313 Muslims and 1,000 pagans. And it says, you did not kill them, Allah killed them. But no Muslim would deny that Muslims didn't kill the pagans. What's being said here is if it wasn't Allah's will to have the pagans dead, they would have never died. Well, the same language is used in chapter 4, verse 157, in which my friend here dropped the ball in butchering the context. Therefore, let me help him out. As I paraphrase, this is the context. You Jews did not kill him for the reason you thought. It was only made to appear to you. Allah wanted him to die by your hands, but not because he's a false Messiah. And the fact that he didn't die for the reason you thought is proven by Allah raising him to himself and therefore vindicating him. Now, with that being said, going to the Quran, here's a huge issue that our friend here is going to have. Let me go to chapter 61, verse 14 of the Quran. In chapter 61, give me 1 second as I scroll over there. Chapter 61, verse 14. Here's what it says. O believers, stand up for Allah. As Jesus, son of Mary, asked the disciples, who will stand up with me for Allah? The disciples replied, we will stand up for Allah. Then a group from the children of Israel believed, while another disbelieved. We then supported the believers against their enemies, so they prevailed. Wait a minute. Chapter 61, verse 14 says that Allah supported the believers of the children of Israel over the non-believers. That's interesting. Because if that's the true case, then we should have writings from that first century in order to see what they were teaching. And guess what, guys? We do. One of the famous apostles, Islam's favorite, or Muslims' favorite apostle, Paul, who's recognized by Muslims and scholars all around the tafsirs, all over the place. He was a leading proponent in bringing about the Gospels. He's the first century source. Now, if they want to throw Paul under the bus, then they got to say that Paul overpowered Jesus. Paul overpowered Allah, and therefore Paul's gospel went out, and Allah truly did not support the believers over the unbelievers, which would then falsify the Quran and therefore render it useless. Nonetheless, continuing on, in chapter 3, verse 55 of the Quran, notice the believers will have the upper hand over the disbelievers. Well, here's chapter 3, verse 55. Let me go there. We got about a minute left. In chapter 3, verse 55 says the following. Remember when Allah said, "Oh Jesus, I will take you and raise you to myself." I will take you. No. "Oh Jesus, I will cause you to die and raise you to myself." What does it mean? I will take you and raise you to myself. That makes no sense. I will cause you to die and raise you to myself. I will deliver you from those who disbelieve and elevate your followers above the disbelievers until the day of judgment. Then to me you will all return, and I will settle all your disputes. Now, with the remaining time left, let me do this. Let me go to Luke chapter 23, verse 34. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith 6929. As if, narrated Abdullah, as if I am looking at the Prophet while he was speaking about one of the prophets whose people was beaten and wounded him. He was wiping the blood off his face and saying, "Oh Lord, forgive my people as they do not know." Boom.
All right. 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
How the heck do I do this? Okay, 10 minutes. All right, Eminem, your time starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
I hate to break it to you, but did you know Father, do not forgive them, for they do not know is a forgery? It's not in the early manuscripts. Anyhow, so you didn't address the Nazarenes, you didn't address the Abionites, you didn't address Paul, you didn't address scholarship, you didn't address the patristics, you didn't address facilities, you didn't address the dating, you didn't address the manuscripts, you didn't address Peter in the Epistle of Petri calling Paul an enemy and an apostate and an enemy of God. And this is the first time, by the way, I see you doing a lot of hymns and you don't have your camera turned on, and that's kind of interesting. On the 7-minute mark, you were still talking about the Quran. On the 5-minute mark, you're still talking about the Quran. I have it written down. On the 3-minute mark, you're still talking about the Quran. On the 2-minute mark, you're still talking about the Quran. But then on all the marks, I was talking about the history. That's interesting. All right, and then you didn't talk about the external evidence. You didn't talk about the internal evidence. You didn't. Oh, but why didn't you address the census? Address the census, Alby. Address the census. I hope I didn't strike a nerve. Address the census, and then address the I am statements having no corroboration at all in any gospel. Then address Nicodemus literally not being attested to also in any gospel at all. And then you need to address the Matthean post-resurrection story where there's these zombies that come in and they're saints. You didn't address that as well. Boo-hoo. Oh, by the way, regarding the Quran, we have authentic hadith where the Prophet explicitly said to the Jews, regarding that specific guy that you're quoting, he said he didn't die. And then we also have a hadith from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, where he said that Jesus was raised and he didn't die. This is a red herring. It really didn't help make your case. Oh, regarding Bar Ehrman, by the way, he has a book called "Did Jesus Exist?" But of course you don't know what that is. And you mentioned he quoted lots of sources, blah 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 blah. The same book that you probably don't know about. He says these sources are useless, but you don't know that, right? And then your own Christian buddies, Michael Lacona, who's a boy favorite of Sheikh Bar Urman, oh boy, he says also in his book called The Resurrection and New Historiographical Approach, you go to his section on extra biblical sources, he says what? Take a wild guess. Take a wild guess, Buckaroo. Useless. Nothing. Nada. But you don't know that. Oh, you didn't address the authorship. You didn't address the source criticism. You didn't address the textual criticism. Oh, and, unfortunately, your earliest manuscripts for, things like Luke and things like Mark are only Codex Sinaiticus, and Brent Norbury takes it as late as the 5th century. So your earliest copy of your so beloved documents, are 400 years later. So good luck with that. All right, now, I promised that I would start a defense. So I'm going to go through a list of documents, and I want you guys to compare his own little, teeny-weeny evidence where his own Gospels, Matthew and Luke, depend on Mark. Yeah, by consensus, this is known as the synoptic problem, the two-source hypothesis, if people want to look it up, okay? And essentially, you don't actually have 4 Gospels. Technically, you have 2, only Mark and John. And John is useless. Why? Because even if I take the conservative dating, it's 100 CE. Womp womp. And then if I go also with the conservative dating of Mark, womp womp, not a first-hand witness. And then Matthew and Luke depend on Mark, making them dependent sources, so they're not really corroborating anything except just themselves. All right, first source, Q, 35 to 50 CE. These are better than all your stuff. Silent on the Passion narrative, aka Crucifixion and Resurrection. You have Galatians, where I can quote you some biblical scholars, hopefully ask in the Q&A. In Galatians chapter 3, verse 1, where he says, "O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Have you not seen Christ as portrayed as crucified before your very eyes?" I can quote you some scholars that say this is the Ebionites, which is mentioned in Galatians 2:10, right? Ebion in Greek, Avione in Hebrew, okay? And if you go to the Old Testament that you like to so-called, quote and prophecy, it mentions that these are the righteous people of God. If you go to the book of Psalms, it mentions that these are the righteous people of God, the Evionim. So you go now to Galatians, it says that these people, according to some biblical scholars, they're denying the crucifixion. So your own sources do the homework for me. I don't have to do much effort. So let's see. Silent, denial, source number 3, Gospel of Thomas, people like John Dominique Croissant, your own little baby boy that you quoted, Vian Vuost. Then you have Ron Cameron, they date it to 50 to 70 CE, silent on the crucifixion. Then you have the Ebionite sect, they are silent on the crucifixion. You have the Nazarene sect, they're silent on the crucifixion. Basilides, whose own teacher was Glaucius, and he claims apostolic succession from Peter. And Peter, guess what, is the first hand witness to Jesus. And he says that Simon of Cyrene was crucified instead of Christ. Womp, womp. And then when you go to, let's see, the Didache, which is dated usually by scholars to 90 to 100 CE, is also, guess what, silent on the crucifixion. Woohoo. Then you have Ignatius. When you go to his letter to the Magnesians, chapter 9, he literally mentions there are Christians who would deny the crucifixion. But of course, they didn't know that, unfortunately. Then you have Clement of Rome, and his first Clement is Second Clement, but most people think Second Clement is a forgery, so I'll dismiss that. Around 80 to 90 CE, he's silent on the crucifixion as well. Doesn't mention anything. Then you have the Shepherd of Hermes, which is around, 80 to 100 CE, also silent on the crucifixion. Then you have the Gospel of the Nazarenes, which is, according to your own Sheikh Bar Urman, dated to the late 1st century, so that means 70 to 100, is also silent on the crucifixion. Then you have the Gospel of the Ebionites, silent on the crucifixion. Then you have the Gospel of Judas, which now is corresponding to your own sources, as per the consensus that I showed you, putting it in the 2nd century, because your Gospels, they don't have attestation, unfortunately. The Gospel of Judas says, in chapter 53, Jesus explicitly says that there will be another man who will bear my cross and suffer in my place. Okay, so that's an explicit denial. Then you have the Apocalypse of Peter, which is dated around 130 CE. Okay, and people, some scholars argue that it can trace back its earlier sources, and it explicitly denies because it has Peter having a vision with Jesus sitting on top of a tree, watching another man who resembles him, exactly how the Quran says, and he's laughing at him because why? Because he wasn't crucified. Then you have the second treatise of Seth, which is around the mid-2nd century CE. It says in there that Simon of Cyrene was crucified and transfigured, okay, to look like Jesus, and Jesus was from far away also laughing. And believe it or not, in this document, it says that when he was transfigured, essentially he looked like Jesus. Your own church fathers, Tertullian, believed that one of the miracles that Jesus did that's not found in the Gospels was literally be able to body shift and shape shift So he transfigured as well. So these own claims are attested even in your own church, whether you like them or not. I'm just using them as a historical source. Then you have the let's see, the secret acts of John. It said that it denies it, by the way, around 150 CE, not 150 CE. It says he only appeared to have suffered. He only appeared to have suffered. But he hasn't really suffered. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 7 documents that deny the crucifixion. 9 of them are silent. 10 of them are from the 1st century. 5 of them are from the 2nd century. And you gave me absolutely nothing. But Quran said this, Quran said that. If you want to become a Muslim, I can give you the Shahada. It's quite easy. So address the points. Address every source I just gave you. You know, the Magnesians, the Nazarenes, the Abianites, the Basilians. Oh, regarding the Basilians, Raymond Brown, who you said you don't want to take from no Christians, right? Raymond Brown, who's a Catholic, he mentions in his 2nd volume called The Gospel According to John, chapter 12 to chapter 21, he says the reason why John didn't mention Basilides was because he was trying to refute his tradition. Because when you go look at Mark, Matthew, and Luke, they mentioned Simon of Cyrene picking up his own cross. But because John was aware of this tradition, which shows even if I go with your own conservative dating, it still predates John, which makes it as early as Matthew and Mark, which again, denies the crucifixion. Simon of Cyrene was crucified. Then on top of that, when you go to the same Simonian tradition, scholars, mention that he must have based his tradition on your own sources, like Mark chapter 15. When you look at it in the Greek, not in the English, because unfortunately you people, you don't know Greek. But unfortunately us, we know our original language for the Quran, Arabic, but you don't know Greek. So let me read this and how it would technically come out in Greek. And I want the audience to tell me, who does this sound like it was crucified once I remove the word Jesus and I keep it as the manuscripts say in Greek? He. They don't say Jesus. So Mark chapter 15, verse 21 says, a certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They brought him to the place called Golgotha. Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him, dividing up his clothes. They cast lots to see what each would get. Does that sound like Jesus being crucified? No, it doesn't. All right. So just the contradictions, just the historical errors. I brought you primary arguments. I didn't like calling scholars a lot. Stop yapping about, this tafsir, that tafsir. And then please just confess that Pliny the Younger and all these sources are 2nd century onwards.
Time. All right. Next is 7-minute rebuttals.
We're out.
Alby, you have 10. I'm sorry. Okay. 1 second. All right. When you start speaking.
All right. So number 1, he says, I didn't address this. I didn't address that. Well, my friend, I was in my opening statement. That's how debates, number 1, work. Number 2, you said if I wanted to take my Shahada, you'd help me take my Shahada. But how can that be? In order for me to take my Shahada, I would have to bear witness that Allah is the only God and Muhammad is his final messenger. How can I bear witness to that? For me to bear witness would mean what? For me to be there. See, this is the problem that Muslims have. They conflate what it means to bear witness. They conflate what it means to, actually walk the walk. In other words, if you bear witness, you're there as an eyewitness, something that Muslims have a problem with. Nonetheless, getting back to the topic. Now, regarding scholarly resources, right? Number 1, we're going to talk about the archaeology, right? Luke is known as one of the greatest historians, right? And this is not given by me. This is given by a man named Sir William Ramsay, considered the world's greatest archaeologist. He believed that the New Testament, particularly the book of Luke and Acts, were 2nd century forgeries, just like our friend here does. He spent 30 years in Asia Minor seeking to dig up enough evidence to prove that Luke and Acts was nothing more than a lie. At the conclusion of his long journey, however, he was compelled to admit that the New Testament was a first century compilation and that the Bible is historically reliable. This fact led to his conversion and embracing of the very faith he once believed to be a hoax. Dr. Ramsey stated, Luke is a historian of the first rank. Not merely are his statements of fact trustworthy, right? Ramsey further said Luke is unsurpassed in respects of his trustworthiness. Other skeptics who have conceded the Bible's historical accuracy included the renowned Jewish archaeologist Nelson Glueck. It may be stated categorically that no archaeological discovery has ever controverted a biblical reference, and the almost incredibly accurate historical memory of the Bible, and particularly so when it is fortified by archaeological facts. Now, this is very significant, right? Why? Because he totally denies the inspiration of Scripture. And yet, Earl Radmacher, former president of Western Conservative Baptist Seminary, notes, I listened to him, Glueck, when he was at Temple Emmanuel in Dallas, and he got rather red in the face and said, I've been accused of teaching the verbal plenary of inspiration of the Scripture. I want it to be understood that I have never taught this. All I have ever said is that in all my archaeological investigation, I have never found one artifact of antiquity that contradicts any statement of the Word of God. Boom. My challenge to the opponent, find me one archaeological discovery that contradicts the narrative of the Bible. Find me one. You won't be able to do it. Keep looking. Number two, before I continue on, M here decided to give us a whole bunch of 2nd century, 3rd century Gnostic sources in which, genius, of course they're going to deny the crucifixion of Christ because they're Gnostics. However, what Eminem fails to do is that he hasn't read the context in which these Gnostics actually believe that Jesus was Yahweh. Eminem, what happened? Why are you quoting Gnostic Gospels in which they believe he's Yahweh and cannot partake in flesh? That's okay. That's an error on your part. No problem. What else is new? With that being said, he said none of the synoptic Gospels follow in John's protocol in which the I am statements are rendered. This again shows Eminem's ignorance. Right? This is why he needs to go sit at the feet of a Christian, listen and not talk, learn and take notes, and then come and bring up your arguments because now you're about to get refuted again. He said no I am statements without predication in the synoptic Gospels. Well, genius. Let's go to starting with Mark chapter 6, and we're going to see while Jesus is walking on the sea, what does he say? For they all saw him and were troubled, but immediately he talked with them and said to them, be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid. Well, guess what that word in the Greek is? It is I. Guess what it is? I can't read Greek. I'm Assyrian, but hey, I can guess. It's ego and me with no predication. Be of good cheer. Ego and me. Do not be afraid. Well, that's Mark. What about Matthew? Let's go to Matthew chapter 14. All right, we're going to read 27 where it says, but immediately Jesus spoke to them saying, be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid. But wait, what does he say there? Be of good cheer. I am. Do not be afraid. Wow. Well, what about Luke? Hold up, man. Can't forget about Luke, right? Luke 21, and we're going to read from verse 8. And he said, take heed that you not be deceived, for many will come in my name, saying, I am. And the time has drawn near. Therefore, do not go after them. But when you hear of wars and commotions, do not be terrified. All right, beautiful. Now, notice in Luke also, let's point this out. He dated Luke to be a later writing. Okay, all right, no problem. Here, you're going to have to deal with these arguments then. Jesus prophesied the destruction of the temple in Luke 21. In Acts chapter 7, Luke records the death of Stephen. In Acts chapter 12, 1-3, Luke records the death of who? Of James, the son of Zebedee, the brother of John the Apostle. How does Luke end his book of Acts? He ends it simply with Paul in prison. Well, why wouldn't he write Paul's death and Peter's death, since the climax of his story is all about Paul and Peter? Because Luke was clearly writing before the destruction of the temple, before the death of before the death of Paul, before the death of Peter, and before the death of James, right? The bishop of Jerusalem, in which Josephus records as being recorded as killed. Now, with that being said, let's now go to more evidence. Let's go to patristics. And let's see, how many quotations do we have? We are going to read right over here from Norman Geisler's encyclopedia from page 529 to 530. It says, of the four gospels alone, there are 19,368 citations by the church fathers from the late 1st century on. This includes 268 by Justin Martyr, 1,038 by Irenaeus, who's active in the late 2nd century, 1,017 by Clement of Alexandria, who was active 155 to 220, 9,231 by Origen, 3,822 by Tertullian, 734 by Hippolytus, and 3,258 by Eusebius. Earlier, Clement of Rome cited Matthew, John, 1 Corinthians in 95 to 97. Ignatius referred to 6 Pauline epistles in about 110. And between 110 and 150, Polycarp quoted from all 4 gospels, Acts, and most of Paul's epistles. Shepherd of Hermes, 115 and 140, cited Matthew, Mark, Acts, 1 Corinthians, and other books. The Didache, which is, here's the later dating, 120 to 150, referred to Matthew, Luke, 1 Corinthians, and other books. Papias, who was a companion of Polycarp, who was a disciple of the Apostle John, quoted John, and this argues powerfully that the Gospels were in existence before the end of the 1st century, while some eyewitnesses, including John, were still alive. Now, with that being said, were the Gospels intact during the time of Muhammad? Well, let's see. Let's go to chapter 5 and let's read 43 and 44. Let's see what it says. Chapter 5, 43 and 44. And here's what it says. But why do they come to you for judgment when they already have the Torah? Now notice this is the Torah containing Allah's judgment. Then they turn away after all. They are not true believers. So you have the Torah. It's intact. Judged by the Torah. But what about the gospel? Let's read verse 47. And it says, so let the people of the gospel judge by what Allah has revealed in it. And those who do not judge by what Allah has revealed are truly the rebellious. But wait a minute. Eminem is telling me not to judge by it. It's a bad Muslim.
All right, 7-minute rebuttals. You ready?
Oh, just one moment. Like 10 seconds.
Okay. Guys, let's go. I told you guys. Double up the likes. The gifts. 3, 2, 1, go.
I want to a moment of quietness, a moment of silence for the nail in the coffin for this man, literally. Okay, despite the irony of the title. You quoted Norman Geisler. How much of a fool does somebody have to be to quote Norman Geisler? Are you joking? I don't know how much you got going on in your brain. Maybe you're distracted, worry about taxes or something. Norman Geisler is not a textual critic. Norman Geisler is a philosopher apologist. He's not a New Testament scholar. He's not a source critic. He's not a synoptic problem specialist. Why are you quoting Norman Geisler? Quote some big boys. The ones I'm going to mention who are actually, specialists in the field. Vincent Taylor says, until about AD 150, the quotations are of little value for textual purposes, so you can't really establish, their existence. Frederick George Kenyon says, quotations from the New Testament are found in the earliest writers of the sub-apostolic age, but they are so scanty. But you made him out to be so much, right? as to be of little service for our present purpose in here. A.T. Robertson, who's a Catholic, he says, little help is gained from the Greek Apostolic Fathers for the text of the New Testament. Your boy, Bruce Metzger, says the Apostolic Fathers rarely make express citations from the New Testament writings. That's like, what, 4 scholars? And then we have William L. Peterson. He says, it is clear that the vast majority of the passages in the Apostolic Fathers, from which one can find likely parallels in the New Testament, have deviations from our present critically reconstructed New Testament text. I don't know if you want to bite the bullet on that. It must be emphasized that the vast majority of these deviations are not minor, but major. Okay? Then you have Caspar René Guéry, who is also an evangelical, and he makes the same concession. Then there was an entire study conducted way before your papi Norman Geisler in 1905, okay, by the Oxford Society of Historical Theology. It's called The New Testament and the Apostolic Fathers. Guess how many quotations they found? If you grant everything, they found out that there was only 8% of the entire New Testament quoted. And out of that 8%, how many of them were they so sure? 0.02%. But you didn't know that, of course. I don't know why you abandoned Josephus as soon as I took a dunk on him, because his manuscripts are so late. I don't know why you didn't address the fact that your own patristics, like Eusebius, right, is the first person on the whole face of the earth to quote it. And then you just, you kind of threw Pliny out to a trash can. But it's understandable because, his manuscripts are 11th century as well. And then you didn't really talk much about Tacitus. You emphasized too much on the Quran. And then you said, oh, but they're Gnostic. That sounds like a genetic fallacy. That sounds like presupposing my theology. I thought that history knows no religion. I thought history knows only reliable, unreliable. Not this is Muslim, this is Christian, this is this is that. But you don't know that, of course, because you never studied the historical method. Quite obvious. You didn't address how your own church fathers, like Ignatius, literally mentions people denying the crucifixion. You didn't mention how there are letters as early on attributed to Peter that literally say Paul is the enemy of God, which completely vilifies his testimony. You also didn't mention how your own sources, like Luke and Matthew, which produce and give us Q, is completely silent on the passion narrative. Oh, and by the way, your own Jean-Dominique Crossan, he was on an interview on BBC News, and guess what he said on the Q? Somebody asked him, what can we find about the passion narrative in Q? Guess what he said? And I quote, nothing, nothing, nothing. 3 times. So you can keep quoting. Quotation wars is quite easy for me. I can just go J.K. Elliott. I can go E.P. Sanders. I can go Lee Martin McDonald. I can go Raymond Brown. I can go Zlatko Plessy. I can go, people like Raymond R. Royce. I can go to people like Alban J. Ip. I can go to people like Heather Huntington. And I can keep going on with the quotation wars and, just keep throwing them out there. But it doesn't do anything. Notice how I quoted church fathers. I quoted scriptures. I quoted the documents. And you actually lied. You said, oh, look, these are all 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century. I don't know if you missed the part. Maybe you misheard it. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Why shouldn't I? I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. I said 10 of them are 1st century. And they predate your Gospels, unfortunately. And you still didn't address how your earliest codices are the Sinaiticus for both Luke and Mark. And you have nothing. 0 before that. Nothing. And even your own Matthew, when you look at the P1, the papyrus one, it literally doesn't contain the name, the gospel according to Matthew. The entire title's gone. You don't even know who it's attributed to. You don't know the author. So you gave me nothing from the 1st century that goes ahead and attributes these titles to him. And you kind of almost conceded that Irenaeus was the first one by just ignoring. So your earliest source for, the Gospels existing is some Joe Schmo from the year 185. You have nothing before that. All you're doing is you're doing presuppositions. You quoted for me the book of Acts as if I grant you that. Sir, you didn't grant me anything. I had to substantiate it from the ground up. Why should I be a suck-up loser to do the same thing? Come on, bro. And then what? What do we got? I am. Yeah, the I am statements. That was so laughable. I was laughing behind the mic. I said I am statements that are Johannine. I didn't say I am hidden. I am scared. I am going to the bathroom. I'm talking about I am device statements, but maybe you didn't get the context. So you quoted me. I am here. Oh, what a wonder. I couldn't use my eyes and see that. I don't know what much to go into. I really don't know. You're not addressing anything. No authorship, no dating. You still didn't address the reliability regarding the census because you have absolutely No response. Nothing. You have absolutely no response for Nicodemus not existing in any gospel. You have absolutely no response for the post-resurrection Matthean narrative for the saints. You have absolutely nothing. And you still didn't address Simon of Cyrene? When I read the Greek out from Mark 15, verse 21 onwards, you still didn't address how, if you read it naturally, Simon of Cyrene would be the one crucified. And all you did was you gish galloped. You said, these are Gnostic. You didn't show me how they're reliable. Like hell for heck. Look, your own Gospel of John is Gnostic. You have people like Gaius, who was a bishop from the year 150. He threw it out. Guess why? Because it was Gnostic. You have the Council of Laodicea, which was in 265. They threw it out and spit on it. You know why? Because it was Gnostic. You have the Alogai sect of Christianity. They also threw it out. You know why? Because it was Gnostic. Use your brain.
Time. All right, Alby, your 7-minute rebuttal.
All right. So all I heard here was a bunch of crying. He has yet to deal with the arguments that I brought forward. And again, the genius didn't hear me. So come over here so I can circumcise your ears so you can hear. When I said an I am statement without predication, that's exactly what I gave you in Mark, in Luke, and in Matthew, genius. Do you know the difference between predicate and non-predicate? A predication would be, I am the bread of life. Jesus gives I am statements without predication in the synoptic gospels, which follow along with what we see in John and what we see in the Septuagint in Isaiah and Deuteronomy 32, 39. So again, listen and then argue. But you have yet to argue. But with that being said, I'm curious, because while this guy is saying that the gospels are this, the gospels are not, I'm not going to grant you. Well, who are you to grant something? You're nobody to grant something. We'll let scholarship grant. But for that, putting that aside, let's let the Quran grant. Why does the Quran plagiarize the Bible like no other? For example, in Surah 48, Ayah 29. Let's go there. Here you go. Surah 48, Ayah 29. And let's see what it says here. Surah 48, Ayah 29. Beautiful. Now, I'm in Quran.com, and let's see what we're going to do here. And it says, and I'm going to read from here. Matter of fact, let me do this. Let's give you guys, I want you guys to see this. Right here, let's see. What does the Quran do over here? If I were to highlight, right, this is Surah 48, Ayah 29. And if I was to highlight this parable right here, what are they going to say? Oh, it's quoting from Matthew 13, 3-9. And what? Mark 4, 26 to 28. Wow. This is Quran.com. If I just click the notes here. But what about if I go to chapter 7, verse 157? Let's do that as well. Chapter 7, verse 157 of the Quran. Here we go. I'm showing my face because he was interested in seeing my face. So I don't know how that rolls, but chapter 7, verse 157. Let's go there. And what are we gonna find here if we click on the link? Here we go. Here's some major problems that our friend's gonna have here, right? Unlike him, I'm not gonna abandon the Quran. I'm gonna be a good Christian and judge by it as the Quran tells me to, despite what the rebellious say. Chapter 7, verse 157. Here we go. Beautiful. Here we go. Chapter 7, verse 157. Where are they quoting from? John 14, 16. These are notes. These are notes. Not to mention, right? He wanted me to talk about, let's see how much time I got left. All right. Let's talk about some more historical references here. All right. Let's talk about external evidence real quick, where it says the following. Okay. We're going to go to archaeology. Leading New Testament archaeologist John McRae was interviewed by atheist turned Christian Lee Strobel regarding the archaeological evidence for the NT. After dealing with the evidence for Luke's accuracy, Strobel asked McRae about the evidence supporting John's gospel. Archaeology may support the credibility of Luke, but he isn't the only author of the New Testament. I wondered what scientists would have to say about John, whose gospel was sometimes considered suspect because he talked about locations that couldn't be verified. Some scholars charge that since he failed to get these basic details straight, John must not have been close to the events of Jesus' life. That conclusion, however, has been turned upside down in recent years. There have been several discoveries that have shown John to be very accurate. McRae pointed out, for example, John 5:1-15 records how Jesus healed an invalid by the pool of Bethsaida. John provides the detail that the pool had 5 porticos. For a long time, people cited this as an example of John being inaccurate because no such place had been found. But more recently, the pool of Bethsaida has been excavated. It lies maybe 40 feet below ground, and sure enough, there were 5 porticos, which means colonnaded porches or walkways exactly as John described. And you have other discoveries. The pool of Siloam from John 9:7, Jacob's well from John 4:12. The probable location of the stone pavement near Jaffa Gate where Jesus appeared before Pilate, even Pilate's own identity, all of which have sent historical credibility to John's gospel. So this challenges the allegation that the Gospel of John was written so long after Jesus that it can't possibly be accurate. I said, most definitely, he replied. Finally, John Elder states emphatically, nowhere has archaeological evidence refuted the Bible as history, right? Now let's go to the internal evidence, right? Whether he wants to agree with it or not, or better yet, right? Let me just correct him on something. I wasn't quoting Norman Geisler as a textual scholar genius. However, he did write a book recording scholars in his apologetics book. Again, you're not listening, so let me help you. Mark 15:21, speaking of Simon a Cyrenian. Then they compelled a certain man, Simon a Cyrenian, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Now remember, Mark's gospel is actually Peter's gospel, right? Writing Peter's testimony on what transpired during this time. Now, why mention Simon as the father of Alexander and Rufus? Where does that come from? And how do we deal with this? You don't have to guess. Let's see who else mentions him. Let's go to Romans. All right. And we're going to read Romans chapter 16 from verse 7. It says, all right, damn.
All right. 8 or what is it got? 8 minutes.
Are these the cross exams now?
Yes, 10-minute cross exams.
Okay, do we just make sure we're on the same page? Do we agree upon doing stopping the time for the answer or not?
I said stopping.
You said stopping the time?
Me specifically. I don't know about him.
Alby?
I mean, I'm good with that.
Okay, so what are we doing? 30 seconds stopping the time? Or 45?
Yeah, 30, because
30?
both of us said we don't want to take too long.
Okay, so what? You're going to ask a question, and then he has 30 seconds to reply. I stop.
Yeah, I'm not going to interrupt. The time gets paused on my side. I don't interrupt until the 30 seconds are over, and then I can speak again. And then we either move on to a new question or just ask the same thing and repeat the process.
Okay. Nick, you do the moderating. If you give Eminem a big screen, so because it's Eminem. Yeah, okay. Eminem, let me know when you want to start.
I don't want to start.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Wait, just 1 second. Reset 1 second. This is not the conclusion. This is Q&A, right?
No, cross exams.
Cross exams.
Yeah, I meant like Q&A for like me on him and him on me.
You're giving him Alby questions right now.
Okay, my apologies. All right, you can kickstart it. All right, Alby, what's the earliest external attestation for the 4 Gospels?
What do you mean? As far as what? As far as when were they first mentioned?
Yes. Explicitly. All four.
Yeah, I would say by 185.
Okay.
All together. They were mentioned beforehand, obviously quoted by Clement of Rome and quoted by other church fathers in the first century, including Justin Martyr and others, but not all four simultaneously together, as we have with Irenaeus.
All right, second question. Does anybody record the Luke consensus outside of Gospel of Luke?
No.
Okay. Does anybody record the figure of Nicodemus outside the Gospel of John?
No. However, as far as the Luke consensus, that was found to be true through archaeological finds. Now, do you mind if I read the point in saying that?
I don't want to interrupt your time, guys. My apologies. He's asking me. You can read as like I said. It's your 30 seconds. Do whatever you want with them. Don't ask me anything unless it's clarification.
Okay. All right. So, are you starting my time?
Yeah, I mean, your time's running.
Oh, my apologies. Okay. Regarding Josephus, do you know of anybody prior to Eusebius who quotes that?
Prior to Eusebius, no, but there are corroborating accounts between Tacitus and Josephus.
Okay. Fourth question. What are the earliest copies for Tacitus?
Well, before the printing press, right? All works of ancient antiquity would be pressed for finding their manuscripts during the time of when they were written. So what you're going to have is copies amongst copies that were written hundreds and hundreds of years later. So with that being said, if I remember correctly, 9th or 10th century.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question. The Gospel of Thomas, that most scholars agree is around 50 to 70 CE, is completely silent on the crucifixion. Could you give us your opinion on that, on to why?
Yeah, my fact is this: show me anyone that quotes Thomas as being, or I can't be asking you a question, but I disagree with your dating. I don't know of any scholar, right? Reputable scholar that would date Thomas to the first century. So sorry to answer that question when it's based on a false premise.
Okay, just real quick, it was John Dominic Croissant, like I mentioned before, and Ron Cameron. All right.
Okay, and who? I mean, who's that to me? I mean, I don't know who they are. I mean, anybody can say.
You can ask me that later. Okay, fifth question. In Mark 15, chapter 21, when you take out the word Jesus, which is in English, and you put he, as the Greek says, what would you naturally assume? That Jesus was crucified or Simon of Cyrene?
Okay, so Mark 15:21, right? It's interesting because Mark mentions Alexander and Rufus and presumes that his audience would have known who these gentlemen were. So in Mark 15:21, when you read that, it says a certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. Now, church tradition indicates that Mark composed this gospel in Rome, and interestingly, Paul, in his letter to the Romans, dated approximately AD 57, mentions a person named Rufus in Romans chapter 16, verse 13.
That's time. I don't mean to interrupt, but that's time. All right. That didn't really answer it, in my opinion. Sixth question. Mark and Matthew and Luke say that Jesus was arrested on the day of the Passover, while John says it was on preparation day. Which one was it?
The feast of the Passover was a 7-day feast.
I'm asking if it's on the day of the Passover or preparation day.
Okay, so again, it was a 7-day feast. So their timings, right, are dating to different timelines, not because they're contradictory, but because it's a 7-day feast in which they would keep the Passover. Matter of fact, all feast days were celebrated for 7 days.
Okay, let me make this a little bit more precise. Mark and Matthew and Luke say that Jesus was arrested on the 15th day of Nisan, according to most scholars, and John, the 14th on Nisan. Which one is it?
once again, show me where that's the case.
That's the question.
Show me where that's the case. I'm not granting the fact that he was arrested on or where there's contradictory references to when he was arrested. Again, the only thing you're proving by trying to show contradiction is simply throwing your Quran under the bus. That's all you're doing, because the Quran states and proves, right, beyond reasonable doubt, that we are to judge by the scriptures. Now the question is, which scriptures are we to judge by?
Sorry, that's like very loud.
Yeah, please reserve the gift for after.
All right.
The cross.
So let's see. All right. So according to Mark, Matthew, and Luke, they preserve the Simon of Cyrene tradition in which he picks up his cross and takes it, while John completely deletes the story. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they keep the story where Jesus prays in the Garden of Gethsemane. In John, he takes it out as well. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, okay, it talks about him being arrested, and Pontius Pilate goes ahead and says that he is free. In John, that story is taken out. So 3 stories are taken out and 3 stories are preserved. Can you explain to us why?
So that's a false equivocation, right? Just because something's left out does not mean that it wasn't there to begin with. It's giving a different narrative from the perspective of the authors. Just because somebody doesn't add in a story doesn't mean that the story wasn't there. That's basic logic.
Okay, that's your answer? Okay, no problem. I'm going to try to ask again. You saying it's logically possible that it doesn't necessarily follow doesn't mean X. We're not talking logic, we're talking history, and history works with probability. So let's try again. Why is it that 3 Gospels, which happen to be the synoptic, so they symbolize each other, they mention all these stories, and coincidentally, John, on 3 counts, and I can give you 10 more, on 3 counts, takes out story number 1, story number 2, story number 3. Coincidentally, on all of these 3 consecutively, exactly where the Gospels match, he takes it out. Why? Saying it's logically possible doesn't mean it is the case. Can you explain to us why?
Absolutely. Is there a contradiction? No, there isn't a contradiction. So what's the problem? If he wants, for example, we have the wedding at Cana in John chapter 2. Why doesn't Matthew mention it or Luke mention it? I mean, it makes no sense. Again, it's a logical fallacy.
Okay, you can call it a logical fallacy. We're just arguing from probability.
I mean, it's elementary.
Okay,
it is a logical fallacy.
I mentioned to you 10 documents from the 1st century, which there is typically no dispute
Prove
about.
it.
And
Prove
multiple, I don't need to prove it. I already did that in my rebuttal. Don't ask me questions. I named 10 documents from the 1st century, 5 of them from the 2nd century, making that 15 sources. And I have about 7 documents explicitly denying the crucifixion, 9 of them being silent on the crucifixion. Can you tell me from a historical probabilistic perspective how much weight that holds, according to most historians?
Well, what's beautiful is that it holds no weight because all historians that are reparable alike, there's a consensus where they would add these in as Gnostic gospels, Gnostic claims in which these same people believe that Jesus was Yahweh and therefore never came in the flesh. And that was a battle that the church in the beginning was battling. Any elementary reading of these gospels, so-called gospels, you'd be able to see that, especially in the authorship of even John's epistle, 1st epistle and 2nd epistle. But with that being said,
Hey, all right, that's
interesting.
past the 30 seconds. I think that's past the 30 seconds. Yeah, go ahead. Next one.
All right, let's try again. I didn't ask you to give me a genetic fallacy and start labeling them Gnostic. I already pushed that back and I refuted you when I showed you multiple different sources from the 2nd century saying that John is heretical. Keep it a buck and be consistent. I'm asking you from a historical probability. Don't give me theological labels. Why, from a historical perspective, which one is more likely? Naming me anonymous gospels that are from the 2nd century, or let's say late 1st century, versus 10 documents that are silent and explicitly deny the crucifixion. You have 4 against 10. Which one takes more likelihood?
Beautiful. What takes likelihood are the church fathers that condemned these heretical groups, just like the Marcions, right? Who would remove all the text about Yahweh in the Old Testament. The church recognized these as being false gospels and therefore condemn them. Therefore, my question to you is, why are you quoting what the church has already condemned heretical?
No questions.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
No questions for everybody. That's way too process.
As you can see, guys, this guy's just repeating himself, giving me theological responses. I'm going to try one more time and then I'm going to move on. Don't say Gnostic. Don't say heretical. These are all theological labels. History knows, reliable, unreliable. I'm not going to presuppose your own notion of orthodoxy. And sorry to break it to you, heretic and orthodox didn't come until Irenaeus onwards. So all these documents predate that. So the labels are no. Let's try again. When you have 15 documents in total, 10 from the 1st century, 5 from the 2nd century, 7 of them explicitly deny it. 9 of them are completely silent. And also in Q, completely, which predates Paul, Q completely silent on the passion narrative. Which one takes more, pay attention, which one takes more historical precedence?
The church has determined, right, these as being heretical, therefore condemning them. Even historians recognize this. My question is, why don't you? Even though I shouldn't be asking questions. The church has recognized what belongs, what doesn't belong, and it's been preserved. And that's why we have the letters of Paul being preserved. That's why we have a consensus on actual historians across the board that quote from Paul's letters and even the Gospels as historical fact.
30 seconds up. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, my bad. All right, let's try again. Why does Ignatius, in his letter to the Magnesians, chapter 9, explicitly mention that there are Christians who deny the crucifixion?
There were so-called Christians that denied the crucifixion. If you deny the crucifixion, you're not a Christian, genius.
Oh, okay, he makes up his own narrative. Is Ignatius early, sir?
Absolutely.
Okay.
He was a disciple of John.
Attesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, he was a disciple of John.
Okay. Does him attesting for a group that existed earlier on, the same time where Mark was alive, show that there is a group of people who denied the crucifixion early on?
And these were Gnostics, and John even dealt with them during his time. This is why 1 John was even written. And not just that, Colossians chapter 2, regarding philosophizing outside of what is given to us in Christ. And that's what these people were doing. These are called Gnostics. And there were 3 sects of Gnostics, all of which they don't believe that Jesus came in the flesh. However, they believe that he was Yahweh, something that you deny.
Okay, you guys heard it. He didn't actually say no, so it sounded like a concession. All right, next question. Why doesn't Clement of Rome, who is, your patristics, he never touches on the crucifixion, nor the resurrection? Why is that?
Well, I highly doubt that. So I'll have to look that up. But let me do that right now. I'll pull up Clement of Rome right now. Here, let's find out.
And then when it hits 30 seconds, you can choose allow it to keep going, to let them look it up, or to move on.
Okay.
All right. Sorry.
Okay.
Next question.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, my apologies. All right. So I mentioned 3 sects that are around the time of Mark when he was alive. I mentioned the Nazarenes, I mentioned the Basilidians, and I mentioned the Ebionites. 2 of them are silent on the crucifixion. One of them completely denies the crucifixion explicitly, and all three of them claim succession from Peter, and 2 of them claim succession from Peter and James. So you have 3 groups versus Paul. You tell me which one has more weight as a testimony: 3 historical groups or 1 person?
Yeah. The Ebionites also denied the virgin birth. So I know the Quran doesn't deny the virgin birth. So why would you mention the Ebionites? Is that who Allah empowered in 61 verse 14 and 3 verse 55 in order to give them the upper hand? If so, Allah then failed.
Let's make sure I stay on topic.
Well, I'm just saying, because he's mentioning the Ebionites. The Ebionites also denied the virgin birth. So why would I take them as a source? They were a heretical group that were condemned as a heretical group and therefore exposed. And even Paul speaks about this during his time, not regarding the Ebionites, but regarding different sects.
I'm going to just reply real quick because this is funny. Actually, the Ebionites believed in the virgin birth, and the Nazarenes, who were called the Ebionites, they strayed off as a secondary text. And Irenaeus then mentions that they denied the virgin birth, not the Ebionites. So there are 2 sects, but of course they didn't know that. Okay, let's try again. Which one has more historical weight? 3 historical groups testifying, or 1 person, aka Paul? Yes or no? Straight up, yes or no?
Beautiful.
No explanation.
When was the Gospel of the Ebionites written? The Gospel of the Ebionites was written around the 2nd century CE. The Gospel of the Ebionites has similarity to the Gospel of Matthew, but omits the accounts of Jesus' infancy and virgin birth. Only fragments of the Gospel of the Ebionites has been preserved. Now, should I go over their beliefs? They've been already condemned as a heretical group, and therefore their view of who Christ was did not stand, but rather was condemned by the church as the church grew. And this is why the church has been prevailing and preserved.
Go ahead, Eminem.
Okay, he didn't really answer the question. Let's try again. One last time. I didn't ask you about the Gospels, okay? And by the way, your own Papi Bar Ehrman, he dates actually to the late 1st century. So correction on that. You didn't know that. It's in his book called Lost Scriptures. I asked you about the sect. I didn't ask you about the document. I'm speaking clear English. I'm even making my own little accent American for everybody to understand. Are 3 groups testifying against the crucifixion, which are living as early in the 1st century as Mark. Does that outweigh the testimony of one person? Yes or no?
Were there writings in the 1st century? No, they weren't. And moreover,
were they then to know which is better? I guess he just wants a yes or no.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go with Paul 100%. Why would I go over the heretical groups that were universally condemned when the church as a whole, right, as a whole, condemned these small heretical groups? So it wasn't Paul versus the Ebionites. That's a fallacy again, but the genius cannot understand that. It was Paul and the church, Peter and the apostles that condemned these groups. That's why Peter.
So apparently,
that's why Peter.
So apparently, theological groups, their testimonies hindered depending on which religion. Oh boy, that sounds like such a falsifiability test, Alby. I wonder if we're never going to accept any other theology. Christianity is just true like that. All right. So regarding Luke and John, you mentioned there's archaeological evidence, and then you started naming locations, and you said that the locations are accurate. Okay, I want this question answered. Does Spider-Man comics telling you about Brooklyn and New York and the Statue of Liberty and their location make the Spider-Man comic historically accurate now?
Yeah, that has to be the stupidest question I've ever heard. The reason why is because if Spider-Man is talking about New York, right, and New York had the Statue of Liberty being mentioned in it. Now, the Statue of Liberty was buried, right, then founded 1,000 years later. Therefore, it would then solidify Spider-Man and his claims. However, in this case, what we have is Luke being solidified in the archaeological finds, and all archaeologists across the board would agree with this, except for the Jahil.
All right. 30 seconds. So apparently he was going very smooth. And then he drifted, got off track. He mentioned the theological response. No history, bro. No history. Okay. So from the first century, since you already conceded that there is no external attestation to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, even if I grant you papias, that's not until 130 to 150. So in terms of external attestation, can you name me one source outside of Paul that mentions the crucifixion and accepts it?
One source outside of Paul?
From external evidence, explicit.
Okay. We got Josephus.
Okay, I'm assuming that's his response. Okay, I already refuted that. Josephus, okay, most scholars think that passage, that Testimonium Flavianum, is a forgery. The first person on earth to quote it is Eusebius, and you already conceded to that. And the earliest manuscripts are in the 10th century. So let's try again. And Josephus, 2nd century, by the way. Outside of Paul, is there any other first century source that explicitly mentions the crucifixion? And even if I grant you Josephus, he's not a first-hand witness, he's not a second-hand witness, he's not a third-hand witness. He's a tertiary source. Primary source or secondary source? First century, is there any primary or secondary source in the first century outside of Paul that mentions the crucifixion?
Yeah, beautiful. We have archaeology, and you said outside of Paul, so we can talk about Mark, we can talk about Luke, we can talk about Peter, we can talk about James. However, Josephus, there's a reason why historians use him as a scholar, as a historian, right? It's because what he wrote was accurate, and that's why historians use him. Now, when it's my time to ask you questions, we'll see if you can answer regarding Josephus. But what's the next question?
All right. I actually don't know. Oh, by the way, Can you name me where, because, crucifixion is historical according to the Gospels. Apparently, there is this Roman tradition, according to all four Gospels, that, Pontius Pilate lets go free of a criminal, right? And then he crucifies somebody else. So can you mention to me any Greco-Roman record that ever mentions such a tradition of the Romans being practiced? Any record?
Yeah, beautiful. See, I have to correct you there because it wasn't a tradition of the Romans, genius. It was a tradition of the Jews because of their feast. It was a custom to them that he will release one criminal and keep the other. And this is the fulfillment of Leviticus chapter 16, the scapegoat and the lamb being slaughtered. Thank you very much for proving that Jesus was then crucified. That's a tradition of the Jews, not the Romans.
Yeah, you can tell yourself that. All right, Alby, question.
Let me tell myself that then.
Don't interrupt. Between a person who murdered people and was an insurrectionist rebellion against the government and somebody who Pontius Pilate and his wife explicitly said is innocent, okay? From a logical standpoint, who is more likely to get crucified? The innocent man, and don't say the Jew said, I'm asking you from a legal perspective, who's more likely to get crucified? The person who murdered and rebelled against the government, okay? Or the person who Pontius and his wife said is innocent?
Beautiful. When the point of Pontius Pilate and his wife is to maintain order from a place where it could turn chaotic, when you have a mass of people that are calling for the death of one over the other, you're going to look to do what? To maintain law and order, to make sure that's his job. Otherwise, the emperor would have him unalive. That's a basic, that's basic common sense.
Thank you, guys. It's
that concludes it.
To get interrogated.
All right.
I'm gonna do this I did with I'm gonna run it the same exact way.
Yeah. Your time starts whenever you start talking, Alby.
All right. Is there one archaeological discovery that has ever been found that actually disproves the Bible?
Yes.
Go ahead. I'm waiting.
Sorry, there was the line going on. Let's see. The Exodus, but that's the Old Testament. So regarding the New Testament, oh, right, the astronomy. You know why? Because apparently he was arrested and crucified on New Noon. But how can an eclipse happen on New Noon?
That's 30, Alby. Do you want him to let him continue, or you can ask?
Yeah, no, because he's not dealing with the objection. I said archaeology, right? I don't know if he knows what that means, but nonetheless. So the answer is none. There hasn't been any archaeologists, and people will say that across the board. There's been no archaeology that's ever been discovered that disproves the Bible. Now, with that being said, is there a consensus amongst historians that agree with your position, or do they agree with my position? What's the consensus amongst reputable historians across the board?
Okay, I'm gonna ask a clarified question. Dispute about what? Agree on what?
The crucifixion.
Most secular scholars would say the crucifixion happened, probably.
So they would agree with my position, correct?
They wouldn't say it's certain, but they say it's more probable than not.
Okay. Yeah, Bart Ehrman says it's rock bottom in his book, or in his findings, along with other historians. Now, let me ask you another question. Are there any reliable historians that would ever use the Quran as an independent source to research the life of Jesus in the Quran? Are there any historians outside of Islam that are reputable, right, that are actual historians that would use the Quran as a secondary source on the life of Jesus?
I don't know if this counts as a red herring, if the mod's going to interrupt, but to answer the question, regardless, the Quran falls within, according to scholars and historians, it falls within the genre of revelation, not within the genre of historiography, unlike your Gospels. So to use it as a historical source is pretty dumb. It's like using Plato for, politics or the Roman War. So it's just comparing apples to oranges. And you should know that if you read the scholarship.
Okay. So In chapter 12, verse 111 of the Quran, it says this: in their stories, there is truly a lesson for a people of reason. This message cannot be a fabrication. Rather, it's a confirmation of previous revelation, a detailed explanation of all things, a guide and a mercy for people of faith. Is your Quran a confirmation of previous revelations and a detailed explanation of all things that are found in the Bible?
Were you going to ask questions on topic, or what's going on?
Yeah, no, it's related to that.
Yeah, are you asking him in regards to if it?
In regards to the crucifixion. So okay, I'm just they're leading questions.
So repeat your question if you don't mind.
No problem. It says, in their stories, there's truly a lesson for people of reason. The message cannot be fabrication. Rather, it's a confirmation of previous revelation, a detailed explanation of all things, a guide and a mercy for all people of faith. Is the Quran a confirmation of previous revelation and a detailed explanation of all things?
Where's the crucifixion in that part? Sorry, Nick, I can't see it. But to answer the question,
I get it. Do you mean all things concerning the crucifixion?
Exactly, because that's where I'm going next with it.
Okay, well, he didn't add that part. Okay, yeah.
Okay, so it's a confirmation, right, of previous revelation, a detailed explanation of all things, right?
I think my first answer was clear.
Okay, beautiful. In chapter 3, verse 55, did Jesus die, or was he made to resemble, to look like someone else, and then taken up to Allah? What's your worldview?
Are we talking about the historicity of the crucifixion or the Quranic view of the crucifixion? Because it doesn't seem like we're on topic.
No, we are. Again, no, it's Quran. It's the Quran. Is the Quran part? Is the Quran part? Is the Quran part of the history? Is the Quran part of the history?
Too many times.
Let him answer.
When you were off topic, I waited and held my horses. Do the same. Okay.
All right. Hold your ponies.
Yeah.
And we're gonna deal with the Quran.
He's taking from my time.
Come on.
No, it's all right. You can give him the time. No problem. Just take the pacifier out of your mouth.
It's okay. Just let Eminem answer. Go ahead.
You guys are the add-ons, yeah? All right. Again, what the Quranic view is on the crucifixion does not make the crucifixion in of itself as an event more historical, or non-historical. What the Quranic view is on the crucifixion, whether somebody was taken up, whether somebody was replaced, has no relevance. So it's a red herring.
Beautiful. So you have no answer. And now you're incorrect, because now I'm going to press you on this. In 61 verse 14 of the Quran, in 61 verse 14, it says, "O believers, stand up for Allah, as Jesus, son of Mary, asked the disciples, who will stand up with me for Allah? The disciples replied, we will stand up for Allah. Then a group from the children of Israel believed, while another disbelieved. We then supported the believers against their enemies, so they prevailed." Here it says Allah supported the believers of the children of Israel over the disbelievers. If this is true, what first century document can you provide for us in which would argue for Allah and your position of the crucifixion never happening? What was the prevailing message of the first century?
Is he asking me, just to make sure, are you asking me the prevailing message as in the total theology, or specifically about the crucifixion?
It says, we then supported the believers against their enemies. So this is the time of Jesus.
Can I just get like one of the two options?
Yeah, it's first century.
The crucifixion, because that's what the topic's on. So we'll say, what was the prevailing message of the crucifixion of the first century?
What was the prevailing message of the first century?
In my opinion, based on the three different sects I mentioned, that I can mention more, and I already mentioned 10 documents from the first century, all of them show either silence or denial of the crucifixion. So if you paid attention to my first and second rebuttal and introduction, that was way beyond clear.
Beautiful. So again, you did not address the point that was being said here, since those are not first century documents, and you can't prove that. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 3 to 8, there's an early creed that was passed on as a tradition. And it says, "For I delivered to you first of all that which I also received, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures." Now, this is 1 Corinthians 15. The consensus upon scholarship is that this is 1st century and it's a Pauline epistle. Now, this tradition is dated back by liberal scholarship to the second or third year after the crucifixion of Christ. Can you name me one historian that would deny that this is an early creed that dates back to third year after Christ was crucified? This is an early creed. Can you name me anyone that disagrees with this?
Marcus Vincent, Albert Schweitzer, E.P. Sander, Bart Ehrman.
Quote them.
Raymond Brown,
No, Bart
Douglas,
Ehrman doesn't actually. You're lying.
Stop interrupting. Stop interrupting.
You're lying.
Interrupting.
Prove it.
Let him answer, and then Alby, if you want to ask a follow-up.
Okay.
Stop interrupting, bro. You've been doing that way too much. Stop interrupting.
That's
all right, I named 5. Okay, E.P. Sanders, Albert Schweitzer, Bart Ehrman, Marcus Vincent, Jason Bibidoon, E.P. Sanders. They throw it out to the garbage can. That's first. Second, I know where you got that argument from. It's a pathological lie. You got it from Gary Habermas and Michael Lacona. Even if you didn't get it from them directly, they're the ones who popularized it. And there is literally an interview where they attributed that position to Bart Ehrman, and you can go watch the interview in History Valley and Myth Vision podcast, where he literally corrects Gary Habermas, who is a Christian, and he's lying about it. So you actually have nothing, and you haven't provided.
Go ahead, Alby. 30 seconds up.
Okay. Now, with that being said, can you do me a favor? And this creed that's being delivered, it's Paul's. It's a Pauline epistle, right? Do you at least agree that this is a Pauline epistle written by Paul?
Only half of it.
Okay. But it was written by Paul in the 1st century, correct?
Only half of it.
Okay. So because it was written in the 1st century, and yet Allah says the prevailing message would be given to the believers over the unbelievers. Why do we have 1st century documents that testify to the crucifixion of Christ over a non-crucifixion? Again, if you're going to say that the Ebionites provide evidence, not just conjecture.
All right, so I already mentioned 10 documents from the 1st century. I already mentioned the sects and Basilides himself and the Ebionites and the Nazarenes are mentioned by multiple church fathers. You have the Pseudo-Clementine homilies, which are attributed to Clement of Rome, so that will be about late 1st century. And then I also gave you the dating of the scholars. You saying that they're Gnostic, that's a theological response. Saying give evidence, I already did in the 1st and 2nd rebuttal. It's really a you issue if you haven't heard. So you said sources, you only mentioned Paul, nobody else.
Okay. Now, number one, again, you deny the fact that Allah put out a message saying that he gave the believers the prevailing hand. If he gave the prevailing hand to the believers, what was the dominating message that dominated the churches and preserved up until today? What was the message up until today? From the 1st century on.
Until today is completely different from the message that was in the 1st and 2nd century. In fact, James D. Tabor himself, who is an expert regarding the Ebionites and early Christian Jewish Christianity, he mentions that the belief of the Muslims are so well grounded amongst the Ebionite tradition that they observe the fast, recite the Torah, get circumcised. They saw Paul as an enemy of God, and he was an apostate. And they also attributed their succession to Peter and to James, and there was no passion narrative mentioned. So I can't just keep playing with the precept.
Okay. So there were people that were attributing themselves to James that were condemned as false apostles. The apostleship of Paul was confirmed even by Peter, right? Not to mention the rest of the apostles. Luke, who's a renowned historian, documented the life of Paul, documented the life of Peter. And this was a consensus amongst the people of that time that Luke wrote before the death of Paul and Peter. Now, with that being said, if Luke was a later testimony after 70 AD, would he then record the deaths of Paul and Peter and not record Paul in a prison cell?
Okay. This man is constantly just asserting his own sources, but then when I mention mine, he wants he doesn't want to grant them. He wants scholarly information, and then he does the same thing. I don't grant that Luke was first century. I don't grant Luke that was the author. I don't grant Luke jack squat. I don't grant Paul jack squat. And then regarding the book of Acts, multiple scholars actually date it up to 130 CE, and they say that he plagiarized from Josephus. So somebody, just like the other people who forge, of course they want to make themselves look like they're attributing themselves to Peter and James.
Beautiful. And yet the consensus of the New Testament scholarship agree that Luke and Acts were authored by the same person. And here I'm reading for you. A great portion of the book of Acts centers on Jerusalem, the temple, Paul's conversion, and his missionary activities. The author also mentions the deaths of Stephen in Acts chapter 7 and James, the brother of John. Interestingly, the author does not mention the deaths of James, the brother of the Lord, in AD 62, or Peter in 65 to 68, or Paul in 67. He also does not mention the burning of Rome and the persecution of Christians. So now, it seems strange that the author would choose to omit such information had he in fact been writing after these events had already taken place. Now, Paul actually quotes from the Gospel of Luke. We're in 1 Timothy 5:18. And he also quotes from Deuteronomy 25, verse 4. What's the point? That they were all confirming one another during the time of the disciples' lives. Now, with that being said, can you provide for me a first century document provided for me that testifies to Jesus not being crucified? Not a so-called belief. Can you provide it? Provide it so we can look it up.
I already mentioned 7 explicitly. If you haven't heard
Give me
them,
one.
You can go kick rocks.
Give me one.
The Acts of John.
Okay, and that's dated when?
Most scholars date it to the early to mid-2nd century. That's one document. They're earlier.
To early mid-2nd century. I'm asking you for 1st century.
Q.
So you have nothing.
I just said Q.
Okay, provide it for me.
Go look up the Q source theory, and then you'll find the entire document. In there is no passion narrative. I've already mentioned that in the introduction. I mentioned that in the first rebuttal. I mentioned that in the second rebuttal. Every question you're asking me, I've already answered all of them before you even ask me them on your own behalf. Mm-hmm. So try again, bro.
Yeah. Like, well, no, you're not actually. Yeah, you're not answering them. You're not answering them actually. So
go ahead. 10 seconds up, Eminem. Go ahead.
Okay, I already mentioned Q, and Q is pre-Paul, and Burton Almack already mentions that prior to Paul, no source mentions crucifixion. Okay, including Q.
Okay, in chapter 7, verse 157, this is to prove the narrative of the Gospels, right, that were existent during the time of Muhammad. Since he's a Muslim, in chapter 7, verse 157, it says that you can find Muhammad mentioned in the Gospel and the Torah that's with the Jews and the Christians. What Torah and what Gospel was with the Jews and Christians according to chapter 7, verse 157?
Nick, this has absolutely no freaking lootly.
Yes, it does. Don't cry and answer the question.
Alby, if you can.
Yeah, the relevance is very simple, right? He's talking about the historicity of the Bible, in which then he's taking the pages of the Quran and throwing them out the bus. Well, I'm here to take Allah from under the bus and help him out, since his own servant is throwing him under the bus. So answer the question.
We just want to make sure that we're on the topic of the crucifixion.
I understand why you'd be
okay, but hold on 1 second. Hold on, Nick. We're on the form of crucifixion. That's not a problem. But if he's going to throw the Gospels under the bus, then we want to get to, I want to know why he's doing that. On what grounds is he doing that as a Muslim, since he has no grounds?
Yeah, you can ask him why he is
because isn't the Quran a part of history?
Gospels, yeah, okay. So if he denies the Gospels, though, it doesn't really matter what the Quran says, because if he denies the Gospels, you can ask him why he denies the Gospels. You can give him a justification for that. But the Quran will kind of be off topic. So if you want to ask him,
why would the Quran be off topic when the Quran confirms the Gospels, and I'm using it as historical history?
If you want to ask him, like the historicity of the Quran verse specifically.
That's what I just asked him, though.
Like that, then that's fine.
But that's what I just asked him, Nick, in chapter 7, verse 157.
Specifically about the crucifixion on that. That's fine. Yeah.
I don't get the question. I heard three different things.
Okay, no problem.
Way,
so then,
this question is actually a theological question. It's not a historical question. So whether the Quran confirms it or not really doesn't matter. Just like
okay, well, no, it does, because you're throwing Allah under the bus. Now, with that being said, we're gonna get back here. Don't interrupt me.
No.
Chapter 61. Here's what we're gonna do. Again, what was the prevailing message of the first century? What was the prevailing message that the church held to?
Bro, is this guy like glitching or something?
You're not answering the question.
I already said don't interrupt, bro. Do you have like a problem?
Put a
pacifier in your mouth.
Take it out of my mouth.
Well, I'll take it out of my mouth and I'll stick it in your rear. Now answer the question.
Hold on, wait. Just reset the time. Go ahead and answer the question.
Okay, thank you. Like, stop with the ad homs. Stop with the blasphemies. I didn't do anything. He's just attacking me.
Answer the question. Stop crying.
Bro, hey.
Let him, he has 30 seconds.
Stop.
If he wants to do that.
Stop getting heated.
He can waste his time if he wants to waste his time saying that's fine.
Okay.
Or just make a claim. He has 30 seconds to basically say whatever he wants regarding the question.
All right. Remember, who started the fight first? Who started the personal attacks first? Him, not me. Throw a little jab at him, and he's already whining. I already said that the prevailing message of the true believers of Jesus Christ, alayhi salam, were the same similar message that probably symbolized the Ebionites, where they believed in the Torah, circumcision, no crucifixion, and that Paul was an agent of Christ. An agent of the Antichrist.
Now, notice that he said that's the prevailing message. How is that the prevailing message when that was the message that was condemned by the church? So again, I'm going to ask you, in chapter 61, verse 14, it says that Allah supported the believers against their enemies and they prevailed. And in chapter 3, verse 55, it says that the believers will prevail until the day of judgment. Well, we're continuing on. It hasn't been the day of judgment. Where are the Ebionites and what is the prevailing message until today?
As James D. Tabor, the well-renowned Jamesonian and Pauline scholar himself says, that this same message has survived through the time of Muhammad ﷺ and is primarily represented by 2.4 billion people by the name of Muslims. So you want to look at the representatives, there they are. I'm right in front of your eye. I am one of those representatives. Okay. So James D. Tabor himself and Jip Reboots, both of them say that same message survived to Islam from the Ebionites themselves.
From the Ebionites. Beautiful. Are there Muslims that confirm the crucifixion of Jesus and the death of Jesus?
I already gave a fatwa on that where I gave Ibn Hazm. So the answer is quite clear. If you didn't listen, that's your problem.
I asked you a question. Can you answer the question and I'll run?
Yeah, if you didn't hear it, that's fine. Yeah, Eminem, you have to answer it.
Okay, I gave a fatwa regarding Ibn Hazm. Whoever believes that Isa was put on the cross and he was crucified and died, he's a kafir.
Okay. But again, are there Muslims who actually hold to it, even though you hold them as kafirs, that they would understand the Quran in a way of he was crucified? Are there so-called Muslims that you would call kafirs that would disagree with your position and agree with what the Quran is saying?
You're just asking a paradoxical question. That's already.
I think what he's trying to ask, so I can just make it clear, so you guys can actually have a conversation. I think he's asking, are there people that claim to be Muslim? To make it easy for both of you guys, I believe this.
Oh yeah, Ahmadis. They think like Jesus went to India and he came back and he got married, and then they have like a new crazy prophet by the name of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. So people can claim whatever they want, just as he thinks the Ebionites and the Nazarenes can claim whatever they want. So, keep it a buck.
Okay. Regarding the crucifixion in the Quran, not towards Jesus, but it talks about the crucifixions during the time of the pharaohs. Are you familiar with the crucifixion during the time of the pharaohs? If so, how can this be true regarding the crucifixion during the time of pharaohs when crucifixion was not known as a means of execution until the 6th century BC?
This is literally like pre-exilic period. What the hell does this have to do with antiquity?
It's all right. It's the last question. So you got to answer.
Yeah, I mean, look, it has nothing to do with antiquity, has nothing to do with Jesus. It has a lot to do with Moses, somewhat indirectly, but it has to do with Pharaoh. I really don't know the relevance of this. Again, I've mentioned the first century documents. You just keep saying they're not. I think I've tried to answer all the questions, and I've avoided the red herrings and called them out. Remember, you blaspheme first, not me.
All right. moving on to conclusions. Who's going first for conclusions?
Eminem.
Okay.
Oh, it's me?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Wait, what did you guys say for conclusions?
You said 8 minutes, right?
Yeah, let me just set this thing to 8 minutes. Hold on. All right, Eminem, your time is going to start in 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Guys, I think this was a very waste of my time. Oh my God. I forgot to mention this at the beginning. Yo, you know, I didn't study or review for this thing. I came in on the spot, ready to go, intentionally, just to make him angry. That a kid way younger than him can literally just pack a punch like that. Yeah? Notice, guys, I brought multiple documents from antiquity. I backed up almost every dating, right, with a scholar. And then I went ahead, I played on the attack, not on the defense. He just played attack. And unfortunately, all of it was on the Quran. Like I said, I marked him on the 7-minute mark where he was talking about the Quran. I marked him on the 3-minute mark, he was talking about the Quran. And then I marked him on the 2-minute mark, he was still talking about the Quran. So, again, guys, crucifixion or conjecture. So far, not only have I proved that the evidence is conjectural, remember that Alby himself confessed yes to multiple questions. I asked him about the census. Anybody records it? He said, no, there's nobody outside of Luke who records it. I mentioned the character of Nicodemus. He said also, no, nobody records him outside of John. Then I mentioned the Matthean post-resurrection, wisely of the saints. He also said, no, that nobody records it outside of Matthew. Then I mentioned Josephus and how he's a forgery. And I mentioned the manuscripts and how they're late. He also just didn't really care. He said he's going to address it. He didn't touch on that. He was flexing his muscles about Pliny the Younger, Suetonius, Marcus Aurelius, Thales, Celsus, or whatever, and like majority of these are 50 CE onwards. Garbage. All of it garbage. Not primary, not secondary, not tertiary, not first century, not even early second century. At best, mid to late second century. It can even extend to the 3rd century. And Celsus, by the way, is 3rd century. Why? Because he was literally talking to Origen of Alexandria, who was around 235. All right. So he didn't try to prove with primary sources that the Gospels have an authorship. He just asserted it. And then he also didn't try to, address too much of the contradictions. He just said, look, just because it's this doesn't necessarily follow it's that. I already said, yeah, of course, that's logic, but we're talking history. This is probability. So we have to make inferences and induction. So he didn't address the authorship. So far we have Gospels floating around with no names. He didn't really refute me on the gospel dating, where I showed multiple scholars pushing it to the 2nd century. And then he quoted me Lee Strobel and Norman Geisler. One of them is like a freaking philosopher. The other one is literally like a newscast guy who retired and then just became like a Christian author, has no degree behind his name, quoting me a bunch of jokes and clowns. He didn't address Irenaeus being the first one to mention him. He didn't really care about the fact that Ignatius never explicitly mentioned the Gospels by name. He didn't care about Clement not mentioning him by name. He didn't care about Justin Martyr not mentioning him by name. So, nameless, dateless, unreliable, 4th century documents. He didn't address, I mentioned it 4 times, guys. He didn't address, right, that the earliest attestation manuscript form that we have of the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Mark is from Codex Sinaiticus. And Brent Norbury dates Codex, and who's one of the leading, if not the leading, papyrologists today. He dates it up to the 5th century. So his earliest source for this text that supposedly, attests for an early date is from where? 300 to 400 years after Christ. So that's what you have. Nameless, dateless, authorless, late, unreliable, unsubstantiated Gospels. And I also mentioned the synoptic problem of how Matthew and Luke take from Mark, and technically he only has 1 synoptic Gospel, not 3. He didn't mention the dependency relation and completely ignored it, even though I had the consensus ready to go at any moment. Then, regarding Paul, he didn't really address him. He didn't give any reason regarding his reliability. He didn't give any reason to why we should trust him. I mentioned multiple sects going against him. I mentioned multiple documents from the 1st and 2nd century going against him. And I'm going to mention again the Epistula Petrae, it says that Peter thought that Paul was the enemy of God and an apostate, and James agreed with that. And the Pseudo-Clementine homilies endorsed that same narrative, and the Ebionite sect endorsed that same narrative, and the Basilidians endorsed that same narrative, and the Nazarenes endorsed that same narrative. So you have no document, no Paul, non-Christian biblical sources. Already ticked out Josephus and showed how that's a forgery. Nobody mentions it until Eusebius. I forgot to tick out Tacitus. I might as well do now. Funny enough, nobody mentions this specific passage from Tacitus regarding the crucifixion until a man who was a Latin Roman writer who was a Christian until the 4th century. Same dilemma. Everything, pew, 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 just happens to be in the 4th century, coincidentally. I wonder why. So everything else from the non-Christian sources, Suetonius, Serapion, Thales, Lucian, 150, and whatever. You're complaining about my sources when yours are literally at least twice as late as mine, and mention one passage while mine are literally full-blown entire documents. Then I mentioned, remember guys, I'm going to go through this list again. Q, which is 35 CE to 50 CE, silent on the crucifixion. Galatians has people denying the crucifixion, which are the followers of who? Peter and James. Who are they? The supposed acknowledged leaders. Paul says in Galatians chapter 2, and in verse 10, he mentions them by name. He says to take care of the poor ones. And in there, the word Greek for poor is ibion, which in Hebrew tracks back to the holy and righteous people of God, ebionin, which is where found in the writings of David attributed to him, called the Psalms. Then I mentioned the Gospel of Thomas, silent. Ebionites, silent. Nazarenes, silent. Basilides, denial. Didache, silence. Ignatius, denial. Clement, silence. Shepherd of Hermas, silence. Gospel of Nazarenes, silence. Gospel of Ebionites, silence. Gospel of Judas, denial. Apocalypse of Peter, denial. Notice how he did not address the Apocalypse of Peter. He didn't address the Gospel of Judas. He didn't address the Gospel of the Nazarenes, which actually his own daddy, Bar Ehrman, dates it to the late 1st century. So it's still up there, even if I take the traditional dating with Matthew, Luke, and so on. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I really don't have much to say. Like I said, I'm just another kid, who didn't even study for this debate, packed a punch. I want everybody to remember that he's the one who sucked up and worshipped the Quran. I didn't mention the Old Testament, right? I didn't go to there and say, look, there are prophecies denying it. I didn't just harp on the scholars and blindly quote them like a bunch of sheep. I went to the primary arguments themselves and mentioned the documents. As well, on top of that, I proved both A and B, where the Quran says they follow nothing but conjecture, and you saw him concede on multiple front points, while I showed explicit documents denying them and being silent on them. So you heard a bit of this, a bit of the archaeological evidence, this and that. I thought he would mention the Shroud of Turin, but he didn't. Besides that, any mistake you saw today is from me, and anything good that you have found in me or my speech is all thanks to Allah and exclusively for Him, as it says in the Quran. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillah. Alby, your 8 minutes. I'll start it in 3, 2, 1, go.
Beautiful. Notice he said anything good is from Allah, anything evil is from me. Well, guess where that's from? That's James chapter 1, 15 to 18, right? Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights. Before that, he speaks about what? Giving birth to sin. Every evil thing's from us. So again, he plagiarizes the Bible, this time James. Now let's talk about Peter in 2 Peter chapter 3, 15 to 17. And consider that the long suffering of our Lord is salvation, as also our beloved brother Paul, according to the wisdom given to him, as has written to you, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them of things in which are some things hard to understand, which the untaught and unstable people twist to their own destruction, as they do also the rest of the scriptures. Wow, kind of sounds like this guy, right? That's exactly what's going on here. Now, with that being said, let's talk about this creed of 1 Corinthians 15, 3 to 7, which was a predominant creed recognized by most scholars, right? And most scholars dated back to what? At least 3 years to the tradition of the resurrection of Christ. The Oxford Companion to the Bible. The earliest record of these appearances is to be found in 1 Corinthians 15, 3-7, a tradition that Paul received after his apostolic call, certainly not later than his visit to Jerusalem in 35 CE when he saw Cephas and James in Galatians 1, 18-19. Let's go to Gerd Ludman, an atheist New Testament professor at Gothenburg, to be dated to the first 2 years after the crucifixion of Jesus, not later than 3 years. The formation of the appearance traditions mentioned in 1 Corinthians 15, 3-8, fall into the time between 30 to 33 CE. Robert Funk is another one. James Dunn, and I can continue on with the sources. What's the point? The point is we have a consensus. Most scholars would date it back to at least 3 years of the crucifixion of Christ. But moreover, what else do we have here? Of all the scholars that have been quoted that deal with textual criticism, there's not a single one that deny the crucifixion of Christ. Anybody that works with textual criticism, anyone, not one of them would deny the crucifixion of Christ. Yet he does. And where does he go? To Gnostics, in which these Gnostics believe that Jesus is Yahweh. So are you holding the Ebonite tradition? Because if you were, then you would hold to the fact that Jesus is your Lord. Moreover, over 40 different scholars of Islam mention Paul as a traveling companion of John and Peter. For the sake of time, I'm not going to be able to go over them, but over 40, and yet he wants to throw them under the bus. The point of bringing up the Quran is to show the inconsistency of this Muslim's view by throwing the Quran underneath the bus in order for me to take it from under the bus, wipe it out, and show him what it actually teaches, despite its many fallacies and historical errors. Now, with that being said, he also said Clement of Rome, remember, Clement of Rome never mentioned the crucifixion of Christ, right? Clement of Rome never mentioned the crucifixion of Christ. All right. Well, let's find out if he did. Let's go to, here, it says, let us lay aside, these are quotes from Clement of Rome. Let us lay aside all vain and empty cares, and let us rise up to the glorious and venerable rule of our calling. Let us look steadfastly to the blood of Christ and see how precious his blood is in the sight of God. But wait a minute, why did Clement of Rome say that? Why did this guy, Eminem, say that Clement of Rome never spoke about the death of Christ or the crucifixion of Christ? Here's another one from Clement of Rome. Let us hold fast to those who follow peace and not to such as only pretend to desire it. Consider the trees. Take the vine for an example. First it sheds its leaves, then its buds. After that it spreads its leaves, then its flowers, then come to the sour grapes. After the follows the ripe fruit. Of a truth yet little while, and his will shall suddenly be accomplished. The Holy Scripture itself bearing witness that he shall quickly come and not tarry, and that the Lord shall suddenly come to his temple, even the Holy One, whom you seek. We also, being called by the same will, Christ Jesus, are not justified by ourselves, neither by our own wisdom, nor knowledge, nor piety, nor the works which we have done, but the faith by which God Almighty has justified men from the beginning, to whom the glory follows forever and ever. Over and over again, he's talking about justification. He's talking about the blood of Christ, in which justifies us. So to make that claim, Clement of Rome never spoke of the crucifixion, shows that, again, this guy hasn't done his homework. Again, the only conjecture I see from this debate is what came out of his mouth, especially the sad case of him appealing to Gnostics, appealing to later Gospels that were written in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century that were all condemned unanimously by the church and recognizing the truth from the fallacy, something that obviously Muhammad couldn't do, and neither could his followers. Therefore, this is why they're in the predicament that they're actually in. With that being said, what else do we have? We have this final thing I would like to say regarding the crucifixion. Radical liberal New Testament scholar and Jesus Seminar co-founder and member John Dominic Crossan believes that both the Testimonium and Tacitus statement are basically authentic early witnesses to Jesus. Crossan writes, Jesus' death by execution under Pontius Pilate is as sure as anything historical can ever be. Now remember, this is a radical liberal New Testament scholar. For if no follower of Jesus had written anything for 100 years after his crucifixion, we would still know about him from two authors, not among supporters. Their names are Flavius Josephus and Cornelius Tacitus. We have, in other words, not just Christian witnesses, but one major Jewish and one major pagan historian who both agree on the 3 points concerning Jesus. There was a movement, there was an execution because of that movement, but despite that execution, there was a continuation of that movement. In describing civil disturbances during Pontius Pilate's rule over the Jewish homeland's southern half between 26 and 36 CE, Josephus mentions Jesus and followers called Christians. His text was later preserved under Christian control, and I give their delicate but deliberate improvements italicized within brackets so that you can ignore them.
All right. We will go ahead and move on to the questions.
Charge your phone.
Oh, yeah, let me make sure it's... Yeah, 34%. I should be fine. 3 more questions. Okay, yeah, so Eminem will obviously choose the people asking questions for Alby and likewise. So who wants to be asked the questions first?
I can be asked first.
Okay, Eminem, who would you like to bring up? And I can tell you who's in the guest request if you want.
Oh, you get to choose? Okay.
Yeah, you get to choose. Do you want me to tell you who's in the guest request, or do you have anyone specific?
The order.
Okay, you got Chad, Rumi, Ibn Abin, Waqas, Islamic Caesar,
Rumi.
someone named just Muslim, Kristen T.
Well, let's just start with Rumi, inshallah.
Okay.
So that's a question for me or him?
No, for Alby.
Okay.
Okay. Rumi.
Hey, do you want to do a minute each to respond, Nick?
Yeah, that's fine. So after the person asks their question, I'll drop them, and then you have a minute to respond. Rumi, are you there?
Can I hear you?
Is it both people, or is it just?
No. It's gonna. Well, do you want
I just want
to answer the question as well?
Well,
Or
if it's
at least
Christian centric, then there isn't
Okay,
much.
this is what we'll do. Okay. So the person being asked the question has a minute to respond, and if the other person would like 30 seconds to speak on that, either that answer or that question, they have the ability to. So.
Okay, awesome.
Go ahead, Rumi.
So it's to Alby, right?
Yes.
Okay, so well, me and some others in the server had like doubts after this debate because of like many issues. And one of them is that the sources that Eminem quoted was very early on, and he quoted scholars that agree with him. So how would you deal with that issue?
Did you get that?
No,
question,
I didn't.
I don't think he could really hear you, Rumi. You might have to like kind of speak up a little
He
bit.
said after this debate, he had doubts. I'm not making it up, I swear. He said after the debate, he had doubt, and a lot of the sources that I quoted were early in first century. So, did you add the word scholars in there?
Yes.
And then essentially, long story short, he said, "How do you deal with that?"
Yeah,
Does that-
simply the way the
Does that
church.
represent your question, Rumi?
Simply the way the church would deal with it, condemning them unanimously as heresy, and having what was put forth, which is the Gospels and the epistles, put forward as actual reliable testimony of what took place and transpired, which is something that all historical scholars across the board would do, especially with the 7 Pauline epistles, along with the Gospels. Therefore, I'm with the church on this, and we would condemn what so-called is early, and yet there's no reliable early fragments of these testaments.
Okay. And then Eminem, now, do you want 30 seconds to comment on that at all?
No, not really. I'm just gonna end up repeating myself, honestly.
Okay. Do you guys want Alby to have 3 questions in a row and Eminem to have 3 questions in a row, or back to back?
We'll go back and forth.
Back to back.
Back to back. Okay. Eminem, this question is for you. Alby, who would you like to come up and ask Eminem a question? And again, I can list the Christians there if you would like.
We'll get Silva up.
Silv, gotcha.
Beautiful. God bless everybody. Good job, Alby. You did an amazing job again by cooking this guy. You know, I don't know what room he was talking about. Obviously, he's been doing this. But anyways, so that's a question that I would like to ask. Here's the tafsir. Can I get the big screen real quick?
Yeah,
if you don't
I'll
mind
give
me?
you the big screen, yeah.
Please, brother. So as we can see, the book of the interpretation of Qurtubi, we can see over here that Ibn Abbas himself is recording. He says God caused him to die, and guess what? The death must be completed. Hold on, that's not the one. Let me just bring it up. Sorry, guys. 1 second. There we go. The interpretation of who? The interpretation of Al-Qurtubi, which is the most giant scholar among Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Now, here is what he said. Ibn Abbas said that God caused him to die. And guess what? It is a death that must be completed. This is what Ibn Abbas said, guys.
What's the question?
He's
the question?
He's the cousin of the Prophet. Now the question is, Ibn Abbas, the cousin of the Prophet, is saying that Jesus had an actual death, and his death that must be completed. Now, are you going to go against Ibn Abbas, the cousin of the Prophet? Go ahead.
Just a clarifying question, if you don't mind. What's the authenticity?
Yeah, the authenticity of this tafsir is from Al-Qurtubi.
I didn't say the tafsir. The isnad for the quote.
The isnad is actually, it's the tafsir, first of all.
I'm asking for the for the status of the authenticity of the isnad. Okay, I'll do you better. I'll do you better.
Like I said, hold on.
No, you already asked your question. You already asked your question.
I
don't need to hold on. You already asked it.
I mean,
wait a minute, are you going to answer it now? Or?
Yeah. I'll do him one better.
He's asking for it.
Bro,
All right,
stop.
so he's going to answer the question now.
Yeah, stop.
Okay, thanks for the question. Okay, go ahead, Eminem.
Yeah. Look, I'm gonna do you one better. There is an entire isnad, okay, that is sahih from Abi Hatim al-Razi's tafsir, and it has Ibn Abbas saying, when Allah wanted to lift Isa to the heavens, he exited to meet his disciples, 12 of which were present in the building, and says, which one of you desires to die in my place by being cast in a similar form and by being raised to my degree? Long story short, Ibn Abbas then says Allah casted him with a physical likeness to Isa and then lifted Isa from the building up to the heavens. The source is Abd al-Rahman ibn Hatim al-Razi, Tafsir al-Quran al-Azim, Volume 1, published in 1997, page 1110. Suck it up.
Okay, Alby, would you like to respond for 30 seconds?
Yeah, I love the response. What a stupid response, because now he's talking about early quotations. Well, this is more like 9 centuries later, and all this proves is that their Isa of the Quran is a coward. Oh, who's gonna come and be crucified for me? Who's gonna come and crucify for me? The Isa, the camel semen of the Quran, is a coward. That's all that proves. Just to be clear. With that being said, Arabic lexicons confirm when Allah is the subject of the verb, Allah is the cause of the death. So you get
30 seconds. All right.
Yo, Nick, can I get just a clarification? Where's like the barrier on the blasphemy and the condescending tones? Like I just want.
It starts with you.
Stop. Listen, I just need both of y'all to be mature.
I'm asking you. Bro. I didn't interrupt him. I didn't blaspheme him. I didn't jab him. I'm asking you personally.
Well, normally you can't blaspheme human beings.
Bro, just listen. I think both of y'all just do not try your best not to blaspheme.
I'm
I think
trying,
if someone does blaspheme, that's just gonna be a point against their own character. Okay. So I mean, we know this. If anyone blasphemes again, if you feel like someone blasphemed,
So it's not a feeling. You heard what he said.
Please interrupt if you feel blasphemed and let me know.
Okay, so I'm allowed to interrupt.
If someone blasphemes, Alby, if Eminem blasphemes, you can interrupt. Eminem, if Alby blasphemes, you can interrupt.
All right, and if somebody
do
that you consider condescending tones and mockery as
I mean, if you're gonna be a condescending tone, that's fine. But I mean,
okay, what about mockery?
Either. Yeah, don't mock either.
Okay. Yeah.
But condescending tone, that's fine. I mean, it's just if you want to talk with a condescending tone, it's fine. Okay, Eminem, who do you want against
somebody
Alby?
salty?
You have Joshi, Malik, Chad, Sword of the Merciful, Beyond Out Theology.
Oh, and Beyond Out.
Beyond Out. Okay.
Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Okay, so my question, Alby, you mentioned a lot of things. So a lot of things that it just seemed like a lot of appeals to authority. Most of them were actually Christian apologists. So my question is about the whole apostolic reception of the New Testament. Okay, so you mentioned, for example, the statement that there are such and such many quotations of the early church fathers that attest to the completion of the New Testament. Can you name me like one actual thorough study? Because I have 4. I have Helmut Kester's, I have Walter Castle's, I have Andrew Gregory's and Christopher Tuckett and Bart Ehrman. I've actually compared the Greek to the English, and their results are, as Eminem pointed out, were like no more than 12 quotations that can be given a certain category that is referencing a specific book in the New Testament. And anybody here they can do that on their own. Pick up Reception of the New Testament, the Apostolic Fathers. It was, a multiple year work on this effect. I just want to, did you ascertain any of the information that you heard from these apologists, and what was your methodology for doing that? Or are you just like parroting the things that agree with you?
Pick a Bible verse in the New Testament.
Pick a Bible verse in the New Testament?
Yeah, pick a Bible verse in the New Testament.
Yeah, I'm speaking about specifically the Apostolic Fathers. So
no, I understand that. So, for example, I'm going to type it in for you. John 1:18, right? And where am I at? Yeah. I'm at Catholic Cross Reference .online. Yeah, awesome. Which hold on 1 second. The first reference is the Apostolic Fathers with Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, and Ignatius, and it quotes.
Yeah, but that's
hold on. We're not having a debate. What?
And
on the question.
And the quote. I got it. So let me answer it.
Well, let me make sure at least the audience knows what the question is. So Nick, please summarize it in like a second.
I know what he's going to do. My question: Catholic Cross Reference is a horrible resource, by the way. It's going to keep you from the long recension.
Prove it. I don't care about your opinions. Your opinions can take a hike. Hey, Nick, if you're going to kick Silva out, wait, hold on 1 second. Let me talk to the moderator. Let me talk to the moderator. I'm going to talk to the moderator. I'm going to talk to the moderator. Shut up 1 second.
What's the issue?
The issue is this, Nick. You kicked Silva out of here when Silva was asked by Eminem to clarify, and then he was booted out. Therefore,
wait, no, pause. I gave Silv like 3 minutes, let him out of the camera to let him.
No, that's fine.
Give what he needed
and that's fine. But now he made his claim. I'm not interested in the Catholic cross references. I'm not interested in his opinions.
That's why I interrupted him and asked him to restate his claim. Okay. Beyond doubt. Yes. Beyond doubt. 10 seconds to restate your claim and answer the question. So we just move on.
Okay. My claim is, what systemic work comparing the Greek of these citations with the Greek of the canonical New Testament have you read or went through?
Okay, thank you for the question. Go ahead.
Okay, I don't understand the question, to be honest with you. Can you repeat it?
He's asking you essentially for a systematic study that runs through the Apostolic Fathers, and the scholars as a community come down and agree. Okay, we know.
Okay, so Lightfoot. Okay, Lightfoot would be one.
Well, he's asking you to name the study.
Start his time, Central, and allow.
He's asking you to name the study.
Eminem, just let him go, bro.
Yeah, Lightfoot. Yeah, Lightfoot would be a scholar, right? And he's written a volume of collections on the Church Fathers, in which most churches all take it as authoritative.
Okay, Eminem, do you want your 30 seconds?
Yeah. Bro, this guy asked you not which ones are authoritative. He's asking you which group of scholars did a systematic study and actually said these quotations actually correspond to the New Testament. So they're genuine quotes. He asked you for a study name. He didn't just ask you for a scholar. He asked you for a study that compares the Greek to the New Testament quotations that we have. I'll tell you what the correct answer is. Zero. That's the correct answer. Irenaeus is the first person. You can skip my time.
Okay. Alby, who do you want for Eminem? And I can tell you who's in the request.
We can do Chris Claus.
Okay, Chris Claus.
This is the third question, right?
Second.
I believe.
For me, it's the third, no?
Yeah, so you and then Albie will be the last.
Who was the first to ask me?
The first person to ask you.
This is the second question.
Right. Yeah, it's the second correct.
I freaking know. I ain't the one keeping track. Okay,
Yeah, it went Rumi.
Wait, so they did.
Yeah, it's because he went first this time, not me. So it is second, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so it went
this would be my second.
Beyond. Rumi, Silv, Beyond. That's the order.
Yeah, so this would be my second.
All right, Chris Claus. Yeah.
Yeah. So my question would be, out of all the scholars that you quoted that deal with textual criticism, which ones deny the historicity of the crucifixion?
Okay, number one, I didn't quote textual critics. That's very foolish. I quoted mostly source critics and New Testament historians. Textual critics is a very specific field. Secondly, I frankly don't give a damn where I LARP and I sheep, on scholars. I already confessed that most secular historians and Christian historians say that the crucifixion is more likely than not to be true. But as John Gaddis himself mentions, that if you have good evidence, historians are willing to revise their conclusions.
Hey, Chad and Malik are like saying.
Okay, Albie, would you like your 30 seconds to respond?
Yeah, so the answer is none. So of all the textual critics, there's not one, right, that works closely with the historicity of Jesus that would ever deny the crucifixion of Christ.
Okay. All right, Albie is up. You have
Eminem. So Chad, Malik, and Ahmad are asking to be brought up. Like they're
Which Ahmad?
The most Antek.
I go for Malik.
Damn, you're giving me tough switches, bro. I feel like, hey, listen, guys, no hard feelings. Nobody's getting betrayed. You said Malik, and who?
Rabbi Chad.
Bring up
Anti.
Anti.
What's his name? I don't even see Anti.
Tamian.
Okay, let me see.
I got no hard feelings.
Oh, Tamian. Okay, I see him.
First of all, assalamu alaikum to the Muslims.
Salam.
So this is going to actually touch up on what Queen Silv brought earlier. So basically,
all right, no need. Go ahead.
Yeah, Nick, to be honest, we didn't say that when he was like last one, but when he brought
no, he didn't. So if you don't want it to give him back to you, right? Don't hand it to him. So stop your crying, right? Before the jinn starts riding you.
Yeah,
Bro, you saw that, bro?
Don't worry, I won't insult you.
Yeah, Tamian, bro, drop the ball.
Just come on.
When Silv quoted Al-Qurtubi, first of all, he said that he's the biggest scholar of Ahl Sunnah. He's actually an Ash'ari, so that's hilarious, right? The question that I have for Alby is, why did his friend read the part in Tafsir Al-Qurtubi, Volume 5, page 153, where it says, وَالصَّحِيحِ أَنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى رَفَعَهُ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ مِنْ غَيْرِ وَفَاءٍ وَلَا نَوْمٍ. And it says, it's the choice of At-Tabari, وَهُوَ الصَّحِيحِ عَنْ Ibn Abbas, that this is the correct saying from Ibn Abbas. Why did your friend Silv not do due diligence, either that or why did he lie upon the tafsir? Go ahead.
So if you're going to slander him, I would say bring him up and ask him yourself, right? I mean, well, how do you want me to answer for what he said?
Is that your response?
I mean, what else? It's not really a question. It was just him trying to throw a jab on Silv, in which I guarantee Silv can easily refute. Matter of fact, Silv can come on my live after this and refute that claim. So if he wants the question, right, tell him to come over to my live afterwards, and then he can get that question.
That was
answered.
kind of a question for so, which didn't make sense, but
right.
Okay, Eminem, would you like to?
Nothing to add. No.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Eminem. You still have one more, right, Eminem?
Yeah. So this will be the last of all things, right?
Okay. Okay, Eminem. Okay, wait. Okay, Eminem. So Alby's the one. Okay, Alby, you have God Logic.
Yeah,
Bible guy.
We'll bring up. Love you guys, man. We'll bring up just Logic.
Okay.
Shiver me timbers. Oh boy.
Salam Amasid to all the Christians.
God bless you, brother. Salam Amasid.
Yeah, God bless, man. Wonderful job. Eminem, I'll be brought up, because you're a Muslim, you're trying to argue this like an atheist, but you're a Muslim, so you can't escape your book. I'll be brought up how your Quran on this issue explicitly says that the believers and followers of Jesus are going to help Jesus in the cause of Allah, meaning in spreading his message, and that Allah helped them over the disbelievers, and that they will be uppermost, victorious over the disbelievers, not just in that time, but until the day of resurrection. You said that the prevailing view, you pointed it to the Ebionites, and that you also are a representative of that view. So if that's the case, they died out. Their view wasn't the longest, wasn't the strongest throughout the first 600 years, 700 years. So wouldn't that make Allah a liar or a failure for saying that they would be uppermost until the day of judgment if there was any time where they were not uppermost over the disbelievers?
The question was so long-winded, I got lost.
If you just want to summarize.
Yeah, just to summarize, when Allah says that the followers of Jesus will be uppermost until the day of resurrection.
This is a question on the Quran, not the historicity of the
Crucifixion. No, it is. It has absolutely everything to do with the historicity, because you've been attacking the historicity and the message and the claims in the early sources.
Thank you for admitting that.
Can you stop interrupting him?
I'll allow it because I allowed.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So it has everything to do with the history. The Quran is making a historical claim that the believers in Jesus were uppermost against those who would come against them. So you're saying that the believers of Jesus did not go around preaching the crucifixion, but it was the opposite. So at any point in time, if they were not up on top, which I believe that you.
Now, what does on top mean?
Wasn't.
Just to make sure, what does on top mean when you're asked that?
Their view wasn't the prevailing view. Their message was not the prevailing
I don't grant that. I don't grant that premise.
So
do you have any question?
Well, you answered Alby, and the crucifixion narrative that he wasn't crucified. You did not say that was the prevailing message for all time.
I did deny it in there. I don't know if you paid attention, but in there, he asked about them dying out. He didn't mention anything about majority. He just mentioned prevailing, and I just kind of took it for granted and said, okay, I'm not sure what he means by that. I'll just go with what I understood. So
let's just get a question, so we're not in here debating. Let's just get a question.
I'm answering, so I don't know when.
You're answering his question. Okay.
Yeah. You can. Hey, Central. I'll stop talking. Keep it to 13. Take it to 13. That's the last thing I saw, and then kick it off from there.
Okay. Thanks for the question, God Logic. All right, we will go ahead and drop down.
8, 9.
Yeah, I'm looking. All right, so I don't remember the last time prevailing equaled majority. Wallahi, by Allah, I don't know that. If he's gonna go with that premise, let me like just flip the question back. The Muslims were literally not the majority population in almost any country until maybe the 11th or 14th century in Egypt. Till then, they became the majority. But I just don't get the question. I don't grant that premise and idea of prevail. Oh, sorry. My apologies. You should have told me, bro.
I try not to say anything. I just wave my hand.
Alby?
Yeah. Well, whether he grants it or not, he still has to face the dilemma that prevailing means the message is going to be the message that prevails, which means spread all over the world. That's the whole point. But we understand why you want to dodge that question, because to answer it would have to then condemn your view, and then also it would then condemn the Quran as well, since you have no first century prevailing view outside of what the apostles taught, which was the death, burial, and crucifixion of Jesus Christ. You lose.
Does Alby have one more question, or are we done?
No, that's it. That was 3 for me, 3 for him.
All right. Well.
All right, let's just wrap it up from here and say bye. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, good debate. Appreciate y'all hopping on.
Follow me after party on my live right now if you want to pull up. Eminem, pull up.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop in like 5 seconds. But yo, Alby, remember that a kid who literally didn't study and debate on the spot packed a punch on your jaw.
Yeah, definitely a kid, right? But all I felt was a mosquito bite. But if you want to, you could tell yourself, packed a punch and did everything. I mean, at the end of the day, if you can sleep better at night, that's all that matters, right?
Hey, I'm gonna just say this, Nick. Thank you for hosting.
Indeed.
Appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, I hope I was fair on both sides. I really tried to be as a.
No, you were good, brother. You did good. You did good. It was definitely interesting debate, to say the least, right?
Yeah.
All right, guys, I'm gonna head out. Muslims, follow me after party on my live right now. Alby, hey, God bless, guys. Nick, you already know, bro.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Take care, guys. I'm gonna have, by the way, before you end it, just to let everybody know, I am gonna open up a live now, but also at 1 a.m. Central Time, I'm gonna have Sam Shamoon come on, and we're gonna be discussing the Quran and the confirmation of the Bible, along with the Quran that confirms the crucifixion, right? God bless you guys. Nick, again, thank you, bro. God bless you.
Yeah.
And God bless all the brothers
man.
and sisters.
All right, take care, man. All right, let's switch the layout